Chapter 1920. Roar! 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 Along with the roar that anyone would be sick of hearing, the flying magical beasts in the mountain range that had been split into two flew into the sky like frightened birds, scattering in all directions. Not only the flying beasts, but even the ground beasts that couldn't fly seemed to have lost their target. They scattered in fear and trepidation, no longer heading towards the center of the city. On the city walls, the city guards who were preparing to engage in another battle with the nocturnal magical beasts looked at the scene of the magical beasts fleeing in all directions. Their faces were filled with bewilderment, and the sounds of whispers began to spread on the city walls. Not long after, even Carter and the others who were in the palace were alerted. They all went to the top of the palace and looked at the mountain range in the distance. When Carter and the others saw the mountain range that looked like it was cut in half, they looked at each other in confusion. "What the hell is going on?" Burrell asked. His face was still a little pale. "It seems like he hasn't recovered from the injuries inflicted by Kinuhata Sai. Why is the mountain range broken?" "Yes. That's right." Yak also cried out in surprise. "It was fine just a moment ago." "That's not the point." Lei Wang frowned. "The point is, the beasts are also in a strange state." Kite nodded and looked at the densely packed beasts fleeing like ants outside Royal City. The flying beasts in the sky also flew in all directions, no one knew where they were going. He mumbled as if he was in a dream. "The beasts' army, scattered?" Behind Carter, the head of the Ailu Empire's number 1 family, the head of the Lori family, the head of the 2nd family, the head of the Saito family, Sato, and the head of the 3rd family, the head of the Ladine family, Harlow, were also looking at each other in confusion. Only Bing Ling and Bai Shi noticed that something was amiss. "Where are Shokuho Misaki and the others?" The ice spirit scanned her surroundings. "There's such a huge change in the situation. There's no way they don't know, right?" "No. Not just Shokuho Misaki and the others." Bishi narrowed his eyes. "Princess Sylph and Miss Feifei are also missing." Carter and the others only reacted after hearing Bing Ling and Bai Shi's words. They all began to search. However, before they could search for long, several figures that had turned into flowing lights flew over at an extremely fast speed. It was imprinted in the eyes of Carter's group. "They are Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, Astria, Sylph, and Fei Fei who rushed back from the mountain range." The Thunder Emperor was slightly taken aback. Why did they come back from outside? The outside here naturally referred to the outside of Monarch City's boundary. Just now, the Thunder Sovereign had seen with his own eyes that an extremely small opening had opened up in the Royal City's barrier. The group of girls had entered through that opening. The Royal City's barrier was personally set up by the Ailu Empire's royal family members. It was the strongest barrier in the Empire. Just how sturdy this barrier was could be seen from the fact that the magical beast army had been attacking the Royal City for several days without stopping, and that it had taken hundreds of level 8 magical beasts to attack at the same time to break through. Only the Ailu Empire's royal family knew how to control the barrier. Outsiders had no way of knowing, not even the 3 great families. However, Sylph was the most respected princess of the Ailu Empire's royal family. Naturally, she knew how to control the barrier. That was why Shokuho Misaki and the girls brought Sylph along. Feifei also made use of the opportunity to tag along. Carter and the others didn't have much time to ponder over the matter. The group of girls landed at the top of the Royal City and stopped in front of Carter and the others. Thud! They landed on the ground. Takitsubu Riku, who was in Shokuho Misaki's embrace, fell to her knees. The pair of eyes that had been trembling all this time had already returned to normal. However, it seemed as if it had done some extremely intense exercise, as it began to pant heavily. "Takitsubu, Sister Riku." Shokuho Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, Frenda, and Astria cried out at the same time. They quickly went to support Takitsubu Riku. Are you alright? I'm fine. Takitsubu Riku didn't bother to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. I'm just a little tired. At first glance, Takitsubu Riku didn't seem to have made a single move in this expedition to the mountain range where the demonic beasts resided. However, if one were to point out who contributed the most in slaying the demonic beast king, it would be none other than Takitsubu Riku. From the fact that the girls needed to shield their five senses to hide their whereabouts, to avoid the detection of demons and strong men, to having Frenda control the water vapor and poison the strong men's water, whether it was the ability to shield their five senses or the ability to control the water vapor, it was all given to them by Takitsubu Riku. Not only that, Takitsubu Riku also granted Shokuhu Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, and Frenda the ability to fly during the battle with the muscular man. Takitsubu Riku also enhanced Kinuhata Sai's flying ability throughout the battle. Takitsubu Riku also enhanced Shokuhu Misaki's ability to control the demonic beast. Takitsubu Riku also enhanced Frenda's ability to trap the muscular man and kill him with a single blow from a stria. Takitsubu Riku also granted Frenda the ability to trap the muscular man. On top of that, Takitsubu Riku also strengthened Shokuhu Misaki, Kinuhata Sai, and Frenda's abilities. She also maintained the ability of the three girls to fly. Isn't Takitsubu Riku's contribution a lot? If it wasn't for Takitsubu Riku, the mission to assassinate the demonic beast king wouldn't have succeeded. That's why Takitsubu Riku's contribution is at least 70%. Of course, Takitsubu Riku also used up all of her computing power. It's only natural that she's exhausted. Thank you for your hard work, Takitsubu. Shokuhu Misaki gently patted Takitsubu Riku's back. Rest well now. Takitsubu Riku forced a smile and nodded. Kite wanted to step forward but was stopped by Sylph. Let me explain the details. Sylph shook her head and spoke in a gentle tone. Our heroes are already very tired tonight. Let them have a good rest, heroes? Everyone was stunned by her explanation. Kite was the only one who made the connection between the girls and the magical beasts outside and Sylph's words. He had a vague idea of what was going on. Leaving aside Kate, Kinuhata Sai, Frenda, and Astria helped Takitsubu Riku into the palace to rest. Shokuhu Misaki followed behind Kinuhata Sai, Frenda, Takitsubu Riku, and Astria. She suddenly stopped and looked at the sky. Her eyes sparkled as she revealed an elegant smile. We aren't vases, we don't have to wait for you to come back to deal with these half-baked people. Did you see that? After saying this, Shokuhu Misaki turned around, smiled, and walked into the palace. Outside the palace, the demonic beasts are still rioting. They're scattering in all directions. As for where the demonic beasts are going, that's no longer a concern. At the very least, not now. However, no one noticed that a strange black light suddenly shot out from the mountain range that was split in half, shooting towards the horizon. However, before the strange black light could travel far, a pitch-black spatial crack that was filled with ferocious eyeballs suddenly appeared in its path. A flawless white hand reached out from within and grabbed the black light, pulling it into the crack. Then, the pitch-black spatial crack filled with ferocious eyeballs slowly closed, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Capital of a different era, Hall of the Heart of a different era. Ziyuran smiled as she looked at the strange black light that was constantly struggling in her hands. It wanted to escape but was unable to do so. It wanted to burrow into her skin but was obstructed by a layer of invisible force. In order to capture you, I almost made the cage disappear because I used too much demonic energy. You should feel honored. Chapter 1921. 7 hours after the girls parted ways at the supply town and headed to their respective destinations. In the boundless sky, a huge airship that couldn't be seen by the naked eye was flying forward at an extremely terrifying speed with a sharp sound of breaking the air. This airship was none other than Fraxinus, which had departed from the supply town and was heading towards the capital of the Baruba Empire. The behemoth forest is located in the middle of the three empires. Leaving from the supply town closest to the behemoth forest is the fastest way to enter any of the three empires. Even so, Fraxinus still hasn't reached the capital of the Baruba Empire even after 7 hours of flying. What's displayed on the screen in the command center is a desert. Yes, a desert. In the Spalier world, Ailu Empire and Fea Empire don't have desert. Only the Baruba Empire has desert. More than 80% of its land is desert. As a result, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Yoshino, and Origami only saw a desert the moment they entered the Baruba Empire. Of course, along the way they also came across many cities in the desert. But those cities are empty. Only a group of magical beasts are left. Over time, Miku started to feel tired. Meijio, who was already experiencing visual fatigue, couldn't help but rub her eyes as she muttered, "Still not there? Still not there." 10 Fragrances gradually lost her patience. The bow that tied her purple hair into a ponytail seemed to shake with the impatience in her heart. "I'm hungry." "Hungry?" On the side, Kurumi's expression became somewhat helpless. "Toka-san, you just ate 3 puddings, right? Is food the only thing left in your head?" Origami also said expressionlessly. "I'd rather raise a sow than raise you." "Who are you calling a sow?" "Kite Origami." 10 Fragrances, who had a grudge with Origami for a long time, retorted loudly. "I'm a human." "A human?" A 4th bunny holding a rabbit plushie in his hand blinked his big watery eyes and said in a daze, "Aren't you an elf?" "Looks like Toka is getting used to being a human," the rabbit plushie Yoshino said in a sharp and sneaky voice. She giggled as she danced with joy. "Do you want to try out a human's lifestyle? Do you want to do something perverted? Miss Toka, do you want to do something perverted?" Miku's eyes lit up. With a bright smile that was obviously not suitable for this moment, she slightly moved towards 10 Fragrances. "Actually, I'm very interested in that. Allah." Kurumi covered her mouth. Only her beautiful eyes were exposed as she smiled. Her every move had an indescribable charm to it. "What a coincidence. I'm also very interested in it, especially when I'm researching it with my husband, with my dear?" The bright smile on Meijio's face immediately disappeared. She pouted her lips like a child. "That's great. I also want to study perverted things with my dear, ugh." Yoshino's face turned red. She lowered her head like an ostrich. Her head almost reached her chest. Origami, on the other hand, only came to this world. His expression changed for the first time. "This is discrimination," Origami said in a rash tone. "We're all summons. It's not fair to only study philosophy with you." Toka, who was about to blush, was stunned by Origami's words. "Philosophical knowledge? Perverted things. For an elf whose brain doesn't exist in her head, I don't have to answer." "I don't think I need to answer." Origami glanced at Toka. "You'd better find a pigsty to hide in and wait for us to feed you, you so." What did you say?" Toka widened her beautiful big eyes and stared at Toichi Origami fiercely. Toichi Origami didn't want to be outdone and met Toka's fierce gaze with a calm yet strange gaze. There seemed to be an electric current colliding fiercely in their eyes. The timid Yoshino grabbed Kurumi's clothes with tears in her eyes. Her body timidly hid behind Kwangsan's back. Kwangsan and Meijio's expression became helpless. This scene. In fact, in the 7 hours since they set off, it happened 3 or 4 times every hour. Due to her parents being saved, Origami didn't hate the elves anymore. She still treated the elves coldly, but that's only because of her personality. No matter who she is facing, even if it's Wu Yen, she's always like this. She can't be blamed for this. However, perhaps it was due to their incompatibility, but even though Origami no longer resented elves, she still treated Toka the same as before. It was as if she still had a deep grudge against her. She would mock her at the slightest provocation, and even spit out malicious words. She would mercilessly seize every opportunity to attack Toka. Similarly, Toka didn't have a good impression of Origami, who tried to kill her in the past. Ever since they were still in the dating battle world, she had been bickering with Origami every day. Now, even if Origami had no reason to hate the elves, Toka would still put on a stern face whenever she saw Origami. And so, this quarrelsome pair stayed. They never stopped quarreling. Now, it was just a daily quarrel. When this scene fell into the eyes of others, it had a different flavor. Ha ha! Miku chuckled. They have such a good relationship. Yeah. Kurumi agreed. It's like a replica of Misaka-san and Shokuha-san. Indeed, Toka and Origami were like Mikoto and Shokuha Misaki. They would always go at each other's throats. If the way Mikoto and Shokuha Misaki interacted with each other was a sign of their unique bond, then Toka and Origami were probably the same, right? That's why this scene was completely different in other people's eyes. Only Yoshino and Yoshino looked at each other. They didn't seem to understand what was going on. Let's end the quarrel here. Kotori, who was sitting on the commander's seat with a lollipop in her mouth, suddenly said. According to the map, we will arrive at the capital of the Baruba Empire in half an hour. If there's anything you need to prepare, you'd better hurry. Once we're there won't be any time for you to bond. Who's getting to know each other? Toka and Origami said at the same time. They looked at each other, one snorted and looked away. The other was still expressionless. Kotori opened her mouth. She wanted to say something, but the moment she opened her mouth, Misaka's sister, who was sitting on the left and right of the commander's seat, spoke up. Reporting. There's a reaction of a living being within 1,200 meters ahead. There's a 98% chance that it's a human. Misaka 10469 reminded. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene on the big screen in the command room changed, and a scene was shown. On the screen, a figure suddenly appeared in the middle of an endless desert. It's a person. No, it's not just one person. Not long after, two other figures appeared on the screen. They were quite a distance away from the first figure, and they were flying across the desert at breakneck speed. Seeing this scene, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami frowned. Meijio said hesitantly, "The three of them are all humans?" It's normal for Miku to have this question. This was because the three figures in the picture did not seem to be moving together at all. Instead, it seemed like the figure in front was fleeing for his life, while the two figures behind him seemed to be chasing after the former. They had been following closely behind him the entire time. That's not right. Humans are currently in a war with demonic beasts. Why would there be humans chasing after them at this time? Something's not right. Kurumi said based on her intuition. Something we don't know about must have happened. Kotori nodded and waved her hand. Prepare to land. Chapter 1922. In a desolate desert, a young lady of about 20 years of age was panting heavily as she gritted her teeth. She forcefully supported her body that seemed like it could collapse at any time as she flew forward with all her might. The ones that caused this young lady to suffer such a miserable fate were the two figures that were following closely behind her. They were two middle-aged men that were undoubtedly older than the young lady. They were at least in their 30s. Furthermore, one of them had a sinister scar on his face, while the other was an extremely ugly middle-aged man. Looking at the scarred man and the ugly man who were chasing closely behind her, the young lady repeatedly used the tip of her foot to push off the ground. She erupted with what little do-chi she had left, causing her body to abruptly shoot out a certain distance each time her foot touched the ground. However, the young girl's speed was much slower compared to before. This caused the young girl to bite her lips even harder. Even her complexion had turned pale. The young lady's name was Milena, and she was the direct disciple of the Emoma clan, the number one clan in the Baruba Empire. Her status was similar to Feifei's. However, compared to Feifei, although Milena was the direct disciple of the Emoma clan, her treatment was not as good as Feifei's. She was valued by her teacher. Because the Baruba Empire was an empire where men were stronger than women. In the Baruba Empire, although not all men treated women as slaves, but when it came to status, women were looked down upon. Therefore, even the personal disciple of the Moma clan, the number one family in the Baruba Empire, was not treated as well as Fei Fei. Of course, even if her treatment was not as good as Fei Fei's, Milena was not inferior to Fei Fei in terms of talent or strength. Relying on her own efforts, Milena had successfully advanced to a Type 8 powerhouse not long ago. She had finally obtained the recognition of her teacher. He was sent by his teacher from the Mo Ma family to a city managed by the Mo Ma family to act as the manager of that city. And with Milena's strength of the 8th step and her excellent management skills, the city under her management was thriving day by day. It could not be said that it was developing vigorously, but it was still much better than before. It was quite well received by the people of the Mo Ma family. However, all of this was destroyed when the demonic beasts attacked the Baruba Empire. But it was still alright. There weren't many casualties in the city under Milena's management. Under the orders of the Baruba Emperor, they began to gather their forces in the capital. The ordinary people, on the other hand, retreated to the sea and prepared to use the capital as a base to fight against the magical beast. Originally, Milena had to go to the Baruba Empire as well. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. The 3 Type 8 powerhouses who had once been Milena's subordinates and were under her control had betrayed her. Yes, betrayal. These people took the initiative to seek out the Beast King and surrender to him in order to save their own lives. There was no doubt that this was a very foolish move. The magical beasts saw humans as food and enemies. How could they accept the surrender of humans and let them live? However, they didn't know what was wrong with the Beast King that led the magical beasts to attack the Baruba Empire. It accepted their surrender and gave them an order. He ordered these 3 Type 8 powerhouses to gather in the city under Milena's management and kill all the powerhouses who were preparing to go to the capital to participate in the war. Milena hadn't expected this, and neither had the experts in the city that Milena was in charge of. Thus, without knowing anything, they still acted together with these 3 traitors. The result was obvious. First, they had fallen for the trap of the 3 Type 8 powerhouses, and the experts that Milena had gathered were all killed. The remaining Milena had risked her life to kill one of the Type 8 powerhouses, before escaping with great difficulty. Naturally, this caused the other 2 Type 8 powerhouses to be enraged. They persevered and chased after her. From the looks of it, they wouldn't give up until they caught up. That was why the scene before them had occurred. If it wasn't for the fact that Milena had managed to find out from one of the Type 8 powerhouses about the fate of the Baruba Empire, Michigan Lena would definitely not have fled. She would have risked her life to kill these 2 traitors. The Scarred Man and the Ugly Man knew that if this piece of information was leaked, the 2 of them would die a horrible death. Thus, they gave chase with all their might. As time passed, the Scarred Man and the Ugly Man, who had been unable to catch up for a long time, couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Damn it! The Scarred Man's eyes were fixed on the barely discernible figure that was fleeing in a sorry state not too far away. A gloomy look appeared in his eyes. Damned woman, don't let me catch you. Otherwise, I'll torture you to death. Heh heh. The Ugly Man's eyes revealed a perverted expression as he laughed coldly. I wonder how the direct disciple of the Mo Ma clan's patriarch would taste. Would she be like the other women and reveal an expression of despair and cry for help? In front, Milena seemed to have heard the conversation between the 2. Her face became even paler. Clenching her teeth, she tried her best to circulate the do chi in her body in an attempt to escape the pursuit of the 2. However, after an entire day of fleeing, in addition to the injuries she received while risking her life to kill one of the traitors, how could Milena's body endure such a huge burden? Not long after, the do chi flowing around Milena's body became much dimmer. Her entire body became soft and she lost all her strength, falling into the desert. Seeing the scene of Milena falling down, the scarred man and the ugly man were overjoyed. Their figures suddenly sped up a lot, flashed over, and then surrounded Milena from the front and the back. Ha ha ha! The scarred man laughed wildly. Run. Continue to run. I want to see where you can run to. Milena raised her head in an unyielding manner. She used her pale face to coldly stare at the scarred man in front of her. I really regret that the person I killed earlier was not you. The scarred man's wild laughter came to an abrupt halt. His face became dark and solemn. I want to see if you will still be so unyielding in a while. Saying this, the scarred man suddenly raised his hand. The do-chi on his body surged out and agglomerated into an illusionary image of a ferocious beast behind him. Similar to the scarred man, the illusionary image of a ferocious beast raised its hand and emitted a clear beast roar. A palm violently slammed toward Milena's body. Immediately, the huge beast paw, which was comparable to a meter-tall rock, heavily smashed down towards Milena with an extremely fierce shockwave. Looking at the enormous beast palm that was violently slamming toward her, Milena's eyes flashed with unwillingness. However, she did not cower. Recalling the important information in her hands, she clenched her silver teeth and crazily mobilized the do-chi in her body that had been squeezed to the limit. She extended her hand and waved it. A scorpion-like beast shadow with a tail appeared behind her. In the next moment the beast shadow swung its body. The tail behind it turned into a black shadow and rashly met the illusionary beast palm that was smashing toward her. Bang! When the two came into contact, a muffled sound resounded. The air wave that was generated from the impact lifted the heavy sand in the desert and filled the air like smoke and dust. At the center of the collision, the beast shadow behind Milena dissipated at a speed that was visible to the naked eye due to the lack of do-chi. The illusionary beast palm once again carried a sharp wind and smashed toward Milena's head. The last trace of do-chi in her body was exhausted. No matter how unwilling Milena was, she could only let out a miserable laugh. Now, Milena no longer had the slightest ability to resist. Just as Milena was about to go all out and drag one of them down with her, in the sky, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly resounded without any warning. A stream of light suddenly flashed in front of Milena. Facing the huge illusory beast palm, a sword light flashed through the air. Pucci! The sword light slashed through the beast palm without any hindrance. The beast palm that was purely made up of do-chi was directly cut into two halves. Then, the slash turned into a slap. As if swatting a fly, the sword light heavily slapped the scarred man's chest. Bang! Ah! The scarred man screamed. His body flew backward and heavily smashed into the desert not far away. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1923. The sudden turn of events shocked both Milena and the ugly man, who had sealed off Milena's escape route and hadn't been able to react from beginning to end. At this moment, Milena, the hideous man, and the scarred man who was knocked to the ground finally recognized the newcomer and were instantly immersed in her appearance. There was no other reason other than her beauty. Purple light particles undulated around her. She wore a purple light armor that looked like a formal dress. Every part of her body was covered in a transparent gauze. She held a huge spike-shaped sword in her hand. The girl appeared without any warning and captured the three of them with her beautiful aura without warning. It was a young girl with a purple ponytail that was tied up with a butterfly knot. She was Toka. At the same time, in the sky, several other air-piercing sounds could be heard. Kotori, Kurumi, Miku, and Yukino, who were still in casual clothes, landed on the ground with Mordred's origami. They stood around Toka without any pattern. You! The ugly man couldn't help but take a step back. He didn't know if it was because he suddenly saw so many beautiful girls and felt inferior about his appearance, or if he was really shocked by the girls that fell from the sky. Who are you people? Milena gazed at the group of young ladies in astonishment as though she were bewildered by the fact that she was rescued by a group of young ladies who were younger than her. But for some unknown reason, Milena had a feeling that she had seen 3 or 4 of these girls somewhere before. For example, the petite young lady with twin ponytails who had a nonchalant expression and sucked on a lollipop. For example, the charming young lady with beautiful, long, black hair, long bangs covering one of her eyes, and an elegant, sweet smile. Also, the young lady with long, purple hair who saved her, and the adorable doll-like young lady with a bunny plushie seemed familiar, but Milena couldn't recall where she had seen them before. Milena couldn't recall who they were and could only ask with a vigilant expression. "Who are you?" Kotori revealed a mischievous smile at Milena's vigilant expression. "Just passers-by." This sentence, Milena choked on her words. Bast *RD. At this moment, the scarred man struggled to stand up from the ground and clutched his chest. It seemed like he was injured. The hideous man stood up as soon as he saw the scarred man. It was as though he had found his backbone. He ran to his side hurriedly. "How dare you hurt me?" The scarred man stared at the group of young ladies with a gloomy expression. "Even if you beg for mercy, I won't let you go." The ugly man seemed to have calmed down from the sudden change. His gaze swept across Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Meijio, Yukino, and Origami. The 6 of them were so outstanding that they couldn't be picked on, and a trace of lust appeared in his eyes. When Kotori and Origami saw this, their expressions turned gloomy. Toka, Meijio, and Yukino also showed disgust. Only Kurumi's expression didn't change. Instead, her smile became brighter. However, those who knew Kwang-san would know that Kwang-san was truly murderous at this moment. "Let me tell you something. Not everyone can be saved, and not everyone can be intervened in every situation." The scarred man's eyes gradually filled with a cold glint. He yelled at his companions. "Kill them!" "Kill?" The hideous man laughed sinisterly. "That's a pity." The scarred man woke up from his rage and understood the hideous man's intention. He began to pay attention to the group of young ladies and sneered. "That's right, that's a pity. Capture them and let them have a taste of what it's like to be dead." This time, the ugly man straightforwardly nodded his head in agreement. The 2 of them let out a loud cry in unison as a rich do-chi current erupted from their bodies. 2 illusionary beast shadows appeared behind them as they roared towards the sky. Roar! The beast-like roars shook the air and stirred up a violent shockwave. It was mixed with thick gravel that spread in all directions like a tornado. "Be careful." Milena's expression changed. "They're both rank 8 powerhouses." In Milena's opinion, Toka was only able to save her from the scarred man because of her sneak attack. It wasn't because of her strength. After all, the group of young ladies hadn't started fighting yet. Apart from Toka, the other young ladies hadn't even put on their spiritual equipment. Their aura couldn't be detected by those weaker than them. As for Origami, although she could erupt with strength that wasn't weaker than the other young ladies, she was just an ordinary young lady. Her strength was obtained by controlling Mordred on her body. She didn't have the aura of a powerhouse to speak of. This way, everyone would judge the strength of the young ladies based on their first impression. In other words, they judged based on their age. Therefore, who would find a group of young ladies who weren't even 20 years old difficult to deal with? Not to mention Milena, even the scarred man and the ugly man felt the same way. "I'll stop them." Milena struggled to get up and yelled at the group of young ladies. "Help me bring an important message to the Baruba Empire's capital." Hearing this, the scarred man and the ugly man couldn't sit still anymore. The reason why they were so desperate to kill Milena wasn't just because they suffered a huge loss in her hands. Not only did she kill one of their companions, but she also managed to escape from their trap. More importantly, it was because of the news that Milena had. If that news really spread to Monarch City, the 2 of them would definitely die no matter what. Be a good boy and surrender." The scarred man and the ugly man immediately leaped up, creating a distance between each other. Then, their figures flew out, as if they were drawing a circle together, drawing two semicircular arcs, attacking Milena at the same time. It seemed that the two of them were planning to silence her first. Since there were already 6 young ladies here who were many times more beautiful than Milena, the two of them were no longer interested in her. This caused Milena to be shocked. Just as she was about to shout something, Kotori looked at the 2 ugly freaks with an expressionless face and pursed her lip. 2 Type 8 powerhouses? Such trash, not to mention now that they hadn't undergone a transformation with the mystical pond water, even before any of the young ladies here could deal with them in a matter of minutes. "Let me do it." Without waiting for the rest of the young ladies to speak, and before Milena could speak, Meijio stepped forward with an unhappy expression. A bunch of filthy men. Even standing in the same place as them and breathing the same air makes one feel uncomfortable. As expected, other than my dear, the rest of the men are all disgusting worms. Upon hearing her words, the group of young ladies who knew that Meijio hated men other than Wu Yen nodded indifferently. On the other hand, Milena's expression froze. On the other hand, the scarred man and the ugly man's expressions turned sluggish. Their eyes were filled with chilling anger. Shortly after, their speed increased abruptly. The beast shadows behind them lifted their enormous claws and emitted an intimidating aura under the illumination of their battle aura. As the scarred man and the ugly man drew closer, the disgust on Meijio's face intensified as though she had eaten something unpleasant. She took in a deep breath. "Ah!" In the next moment, a high-pitched voice sounded from Meijio's mouth. At the same time, a circular formless and colorless ripple suddenly spread out with Meijio at the center. In the blink of an eye, it violently collided with the scarred man and the ugly man. Boom! In an instant, a loud, muffled sound echoed in the desert. Poochie! The scarred man and the ugly man who were hit by the invisible ripples spat out mouthfuls of blood as though they had been hit by a truck. They flew backward in an extremely miserable posture and smashed into the desert, stirring up a few meters of sand and dust. With just a single strike, the 2 Tier 8 powerhouses were defeated once again. Milena's expression was completely frozen. The scarred man and the ugly man who struggled to lift their heads in the sand and looked at Meijio with disgust in their eyes. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they cried out involuntarily. Type 9 Powerhouse? Chapter 1924. Tier 9 Powerhouse. These 4 words made Milena, the scarred man, and the ugly man completely dumbfounded, not knowing what to do. Was this young girl who kept saying, "Apart from my dear, all other men are disgusting bugs even 20 years old"? She shouldn't be, right? A Tier 9 powerhouse who isn't even 20 years old? I've never heard of such a person before. He had heard of Milena, the scarred man, and the ugly man before. Currently, Ailu's princess, Sylph's fiancé, was the youngest person in history to reach the 9th order. But he was at least 20 years old, wasn't he? In front of them was an extremely beautiful young lady whose face was filled with disgust. She was at most 17 or 18 years old. If the other party was a powerhouse of the 8th step, perhaps Milena, the scarred man, and the ugly man could still reluctantly accept it. But if the other party was a powerhouse of the 9th step, who could accept it? Since when did a Tier 9 powerhouse become so cheap? However, no matter how much Milena, the scarred man, and the ugly man rejected this fact in their hearts, and whether or not the other party was a powerhouse of the 9th stage, this young girl in front of them was indeed an existence that could casually defeat 2 powerhouses of the 8th stage with a single move, making them unable to stand up. Therefore, it was impossible for the scarred man and the ugly man to be a match for this terrifying young woman. Not to mention the disgust on Meijio's face. The scarred man and the ugly man could foresee that if they were to fall into her hands, then their chances of survival would be 0. Not to mention, the 2 of them have joined the demonic beast's camp. They're traitors to the human world. Tisk. Tsk. Thinking of this, the scarred man and the ugly man didn't even have the intention to exchange glances with each other. Almost at the same time, they forcefully propped up their heavily injured bodies, disregarding the continuous spurting of blood from their injuries, and jumped up as if they had gone crazy. They fled into the distance. Chase them. Seeing the two shameless ugly people running away without even thinking, Milena, who was still in a daze, immediately came back to her senses. Don't let those two traitors get away. However, hearing Milena's shout, Meiju didn't do as she was told. Instead, she pouted unhappily and turned around. He walked back towards them. Only then did Milena remember that she wasn't even sure if the other party was a friend or foe. Immediately, she became a little nervous. After all, standing in front of Milena was a terrifying existence that could defeat two powerhouses of the 8th order in an instant. 9th stage powerhouse. That was an existence that even Milena had to fear. Just as Milena was about to step back and distance herself from Meiju, Kotori, who had been observing Milena thoughtfully, spoke up. All right, there are already people chasing after them. Hearing this, Milena stared blankly for a moment before she finally realized that something was amiss. Among the group of 6, there was a girl with a charming smile on her face. The beautiful girl whose eyes were covered by long bangs had disappeared from the scene at some point in time. She was nowhere to be seen. Discovering this, Milena could not help but be overwhelmed with shock. When Milena finally realized, to be able to move together with a 9th stage powerhouse and seem to have a good relationship, how could a group of mysterious girls be ordinary people? The answer was naturally no. Looking at the girls who were not older than her, Milena could not help but have a thought that made her want to laugh out loud. These girls, could it be that they were all 9th stage powerhouses? This answer. No one could give Milena an answer, nor did they have the time to give her an answer. Not long after, a wriggling shadow suddenly emerged from the yellow sand, and within the shadow, 2 people slowly emerged from it. It was the scarred man and the ugly man who had fled for their lives. However, at this time, these 2 veteran powerhouses no longer had the aura of a living person. Their eyes were wide open, and their faces were filled with fear and despair. It was unknown what they saw before they died, or what kind of punishment they were subjected to, but it made people feel a chill in their hearts. At the same time, the elegant young lady, who only revealed a single wine-red eye, slowly emerged from the shadow. Only when her heels emerged from the ground did the squirming shadow solidify and transform into the shadow of the young lady. Arara! Kurumi tilted her head. She did not even look at the ugly man and the scarred man on the ground. Her tone was still as elegant and seductive as before. I thought I could play for a while longer. Hearing these words, Milena could not help but feel a chill in her heart. She clenched her teeth and forced a smile. May I know who you are, sirs? Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino did not speak. Only Kotori had a faint smile on her face. I am Itsuka Kotori. Itsuka Kotori? Milena had an idea. Her eyes widened as she looked at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino. She cried out in surprise. It's you guys. As the direct disciple of the Moma clan, the #1 clan in the Baruba Empire, how could Milena not have studied at the Spalier World Academy before? In the Spalier World Academy, each of the 3 empires and 9 great houses had their own factions. For example, Sylph's Snow Song, Feifei's Deadly Forest, Bing Ling's Sea of Frozen Ice, and Bishi's Crimson Land were among the 12 strongest factions in the academy. Before Milena reached the Type 8 realm, she was a member of the Mo family of the Baruba Empire. She was a special student of the Mo family, one of the 12 strongest factions in the Silveria World Institute. At that time, Milena was already at the peak of rank 7. She was on the same level as Feifei, Bing Ling, and Bishi. However, Due to the Baruba Empire's preference for males, she wasn't able to become the leader of the Moma clan. Even so, she still managed to occupy one of the top 10 spots. Good times didn't last long. Ever since Wu Yen led his summoned creatures into the Spalier World Academy and occupied a few spots in the Academy tournament, Mileena was pushed out of the top 10. Later on, Mileena witnessed how Wu Yen defeated Prince Jafar of the Baruba Empire and Prince Kaya of the Fair Empire, easily obtaining victory. At that time, she was filled with admiration for Wu Yen. It was a pity that after that, Wu Yen brought the girls by his side and applied to graduate from the Spalier World Academy, disappearing from Mileena's sight. Later on, all sorts of news about Wu Yen reached Mileena's ears. For example, he had become the fiancé of Princess Sylph of the Ailu Empire, or the youngest Type 9 powerhouse in history. This made Mileena realize that the two of them were not from the same world. With a sudden epiphany, she broke through to the Type 8 realm and applied to graduate from the Spalier World Academy, becoming a city manager. In other words, Mileena's breakthrough to the Type 8 realm was largely due to Wu Yen. If Wu Yen knew about this, his jaw would drop to the ground. In all honesty, Wu Yen really didn't know that he had someone who admired him. He even helped her breakthrough and he didn't even know the name of this person. However, for Mileena, who had been paying attention to Wu Yen, she had naturally heard of the girls by his side. She had even caught a glimpse of them from afar. Just now, Mileena didn't think of it, but now, she finally remembered. This was the reason why Mileena felt familiar with Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino. Kotori also remembered that she had seen Mileena a few times when she was dealing with the 12 factions in the Spalier World Academy. That was why she had such an expression and saved Mileena from the scar-faced man and the ugly man. Looking at Kotori's expression, Mileena's expression became awkward. "I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you." "I don't mind." Kotori looked straight at Mileena. "Compared to that, I'm more interested in why you're being chased." "We've been betrayed." Mileena's expression changed as she bit her lips. "No, I should say that the Baruba Empire is about to be betrayed." Chapter 1925. The Baruba Empire is about to be betrayed? Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Meijio, Origami, Yoshino and the other girls were all stunned. Looking at the group of girls in front of her, Mileena was a little hesitant. She didn't know if she should trust them and leak the information that she had obtained with great difficulty. After all, even though 4 of the girls were from the same school as Mileena, they didn't interact much in the Spalier World Academy. Even if they did, they would only meet a few times when they represented their respective factions. Forget about being familiar with them, it would be a stretch to call them strangers. With such a group of girls, it was hard to guarantee that they were trustworthy, wasn't it? But on second thought, Mileena felt that if she kept this information to herself, there might be a chance that no one would know about it. At that time, the only thing waiting for the Baruba Empire would be destruction. Furthermore, if these girls wanted to do something to her, with the strength that Kurumi and Meijio displayed, Mileena wouldn't be able to resist. Thinking of this, Mileena gritted her teeth and revealed the information she got from one of the traitors after falling into their trap. It turns out that the traitor had secretly found the Beast King and surrendered to him. It wasn't only the Tier 8 powerhouses in the city that Mileena was in charge of. There were traitors in other cities as well. Due to the fact that 80% of the Baruba Empire's territory was desert, the connection between the cities was even weaker than the Ailu and Faya empires. Under such circumstances, the Baruba Empire was different from the Ailu and Faya empires. All the cities in the Baruba Empire were unified by the royal family and assigned to the 3 great clans to manage. Through this method, communication between cities was strengthened. The first clan was the Mama clan. The second clan was the Vance clan. The third clan was the Mama clan. Every city manager in the Baruba Empire was someone from these 3 great clans. It was because of this system that Mileena was able to become a Tier 8 powerhouse. She was entrusted by the patriarch of the Mama clan to manage a city. Manage it. Situations like Lena's were very common in the Baruba Empire. Basically, even the direct descendants of the family would have to break through to rank 8 to reach rank 8. They would be entrusted with the management of a city. It could also be considered a form of training. However, but now, this system had become a true crisis for the Baruba Empire. The reason was simple. Other than Melina's city, there were other traders in other cities. In that case, the chances of these traders being from the 3 great clans were very high. There was a trader among the 3 great families of the empire? Was this not a crisis? The 3 great clans were the true leaders of the Baruba Empire. Since there were traders in the upper echelons of the empire, the effect they could have was absolutely fatal. For example, as long as there were traders who knew the method to remove the barrier around the Baruba Empire's capital city, they would remove the barrier when the demonic beasts attacked the capital city. When the flying demonic beasts charged into the capital city, the casualties would be disastrous. Another example would be if some of the traders put poison in the food of the city guards, or even the food of the Baruba Empire's royal family and the 3 great clans. Then the Baruba Empire would be finished. But now, no matter if it's Ailu, Baruba, or Faya Empire, they all gave the same order to gather all their forces in one of their cities. They gave up on the other cities to fight against the demonic beasts. This made it easier for the traders to sneak into their cities. This was no longer a matter that could be solved with a joke. Lena even suspected that the Beast King had given the other traders an order to wipe out all the experts gathered in the other cities, leaving only the traders to sneak into the capital city. This way, not only would the capital city's forces be greatly reduced, it might even be filled with traders. This way, there would be no need for a war at all. Just let the traders and humans kill each other and engage in internal strife. In the end, the traders would openly open the city gates and let the magical beasts swagger into the city to wreak havoc. The Baruba Empire was truly standing on the border of destruction. The royal family and the 3 great clans have yet to discover that there were so many traitors among the humans. This is the most dangerous thing. Therefore, after listening to Lena's explanation, except for Toka, Yoshino, and Miku, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami, who were still confused, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami frowned. This is troublesome. That was the first thing Kotori said after listening to Lena's explanation. I didn't think this half-baked beast king who used the power of a false god would actually use humans to plot against us. It seems like we have underestimated demonic beasts. Although there had never been a saying, in the hearts of humans, magical beasts were just a group of powerful wild beasts. They had nothing to do with strategies, plans, or stratagems. It was hard to imagine that a group of beasts would make use of the strengths of humans. Kotori and the other girls are no exception. It's because of this subconscious impression that the Baruba Empire's royal family and 3 great clans never thought that there would be traitors among their own people. That's why they gathered their forces so recklessly. From this point of view, the situation in the Ailu Empire is undoubtedly much better. At the very least, the muscular man who led the demonic beasts to attack the Ailu Empire is not a strategist. He only knows how to attack recklessly. On the other hand, the Beast King who led the demonic beasts to attack the Baruba Empire isn't as reckless as the muscular man. Humans are truly hopeless creatures. Kwang-san sighed. They are demonic beasts who view humans as food. They even want to turn the entire Spalier world into a hunting ground for humans. They won't accept humans. Even if they surrender, they won't be able to escape death when the Spalier world is transformed into a world of demonic beasts. Why would they choose to surrender? You can't expect every human to be a righteous person. You can't expect all humans to be unafraid of death. Origami said coldly. In order to survive, humans will use all sorts of methods. Betrayal is one of them. Even if they know they will be despised, Origami's words silenced all the girls in the room. In order to survive. It's a cruel and realistic reason. Even if this reason seemed to be a group of foolish humans who couldn't see the situation clearly and didn't hesitate to betray the entire human world for this reason, it couldn't be denied that the vast majority of humans were existences who would sell everything for their own survival. This isn't just limited to humans, isn't it the same among demonic beasts? The only difference is that humans will use all sorts of methods to survive, while demonic beasts will use their teeth and claws to survive. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, they will use their flesh and blood to build a space for survival. Perhaps the demonic beasts in charge of invading the Baruba Empire saw the similarities and differences between humans and demonic beasts. That's why they used their survival instincts to force humans to destroy themselves. No matter what, I have to get to the capital before the demonic beasts attack again. Milena shook her head. She didn't want to talk about this uncomfortable topic. Right now, most of the powerhouses in the cities are gathered in the capital. There must be traders everywhere in the capital. I have to bring this news back. Due to the Baruba Empire being a desert, demonic beasts are very adaptable to the environment. However, there are also demonic beasts that are very picky about their environment. Due to the terrain restrictions, the Baruba Empire's magic beasts had a much harder time than the other two empires. Every time they attacked, they would have to expend a lot of energy. So far, the Baruba Empire's capital had only been attacked 2 or 3 times in the past few days. This could be considered an advantage. However, it also gave the traders more chances to sneak into the capital. Milena could imagine the disaster that would befall King City the next time the magical beasts attacked King City and colluded with the traders in King City from both inside and outside. The group of girls also looked at each other and nodded their heads. Chapter 1926. In the middle of the endless desert, there were 2 towering mountain ranges. The mountain ranges looked like deep valleys. They looked like 2 giant fingers clasped together, towering into the clouds. Between the gaps of the mountain range that looked like 2 fingers, an incomparably huge city was located here. It was like a bridge connecting the mountain range. It was very spectacular. This was the most important city in the Baruba Empire. It was located between 2 gigantic mountain ranges. The Baruba Empire's royal city was different from the Ailu Empire's royal city. The Baruba Empire's royal city was more like a fortress than a city. Not only was the surface area huge, but the entire body of the city wall was also made of pitch-black underground rocks, just like the barbed rock walls in the abyss. Not only did it have an abnormally terrifying defensive power, if something were to be placed on the barbs on the city wall, the result would definitely be flesh lacerated. This kind of wall was like a hedgehog. Just looking at it gave people goosebumps, not to mention that there were still a lot of city guards stationed on top of the wall at this time. If one looked closely, they would notice that on top of the walls, soldiers were armed with bows and arrows. Behind them were groups of magicians with staffs in hand. They looked like they were ready to attack at any moment. This kind of arrangement was similar to the one in the Ailu Empire's city. In addition, there was the terrifying city wall and the faintly discernible barrier that rippled like water. If either the Ailu Empire or the Faya Empire were to attack the Baruba Empire's city, they would have to pay a heavy price to break through the walls. It was a pity that this time, it wasn't the Empire that was attacking this fortress, but the real magical beast army. With the magical beast's fearless attacks, the porcupine walls didn't have any effect at all. It might even provoke the magical beast's bloodlust. Flying magical beasts didn't even need to care about the walls. They only needed to attack from the sky. This was the worst enemy in history. Because of this, the warriors and magi on the walls of the Baruba Empire's royal city didn't relax for even a moment. Their faces were tense. They didn't know when the magical beasts would attack again. Fortunately, unlike the Ailu Kingdom's royal city, the Baruba Kingdom's royal city was built in the middle of 2 towering mountain ranges. Both sides were blocked by mountain ranges. Behind Monarch City, the two mountain ranges were directly connected. In other words, the capital of the Baruba Empire was located in the middle of a huge U-shaped mountain range. If the magical beasts wanted to attack the capital of the Baruba Empire, they would have to either attack from above or from the front. Hence, the city guards didn't need to be on guard against the magical beast army coming from all directions like the Ailu Empire. All they needed to do was to keep an eye on the sky. Compared to the Ailu Empire, the city guards were much more relaxed. Moreover, the desert was also an extremely advantageous terrain. It was very difficult for the magical beasts to charge through the yellow sand. The flying magical beasts would also be attacked by the sand from time to time. Whether it was their condition, vision, or breathing, it was very difficult for them. As a result, the magical beasts had not gained any benefits from their attacks so far. They could only make 2 or 3 symbolic attacks, which did not cause any pain or itch at all. Therefore, the Baruba Empire's city had a huge advantage in terms of terrain. The citizens were also very used to fighting in the desert. Their people were also very good at fighting in the desert. Based on the current situation, the Baruba Empire might be the only one who could defend King City from being invaded by the magical beasts. As long as there were no accidents, however, this accident was already buried in the Baruba Empire's city. The Baruba Empire's city, which was supposed to be the most difficult to attack, was now the most likely to be breached. At a certain moment, a flying ship that couldn't be seen with the naked eye broke through the heavy obstacles in the sky. The ship screeched in the air, and the engine roared as it headed towards the Baruba Empire's city. "We're here." In the command room of Fraxinus, Milina pointed at the image of the Baruba Empire's city on the screen. "That's the Baruba Empire's city." "Wow." Looking at the big screen showing the fortress-like King City sandwiched between 2 towering mountains, the girls all exclaimed in amazement. "So this is what they call a natural stronghold?" Kurumi couldn't help but gasp in awe. With a city like this, the Beast King who led the attack on the Baruba Empire's magical beast army must have a headache. "This should make things a lot easier for us." Kotori sucked on her lollipop as she stared at the city on the screen. She nodded without a change in expression. "I finally understand why the Beast King needs the help of a group of traders. If they want to rely on brute force to break through this fortress, unless that pseudo-demigod Beast King personally takes action, they won't be able to occupy this dangerous place even if they use all of their magical beasts." After saying this, Kotori looked at Milina. "We're about to land. You'll be in charge of communicating with the city." "I understand." Milina nodded heavily. The engine on Fraxinus's back revved up, and Fraxinus shot forward at an incredible speed. It didn't take long for Fraxinus to appear in the sky above the Baruba Empire's capital. Fraxinus's figure slowly appeared in the sky above the Baruba Empire's capital. The sudden appearance of a giant airship in the sky naturally caused a commotion among the city guards. They were shocked out of their wits and almost launched an attack. Only after realizing that it was a rather peculiar airship did they calm down. After all, magical beasts wouldn't ride airships, right? Therefore, all the city guards knew that the intruder must be a human. At the same time, a black or white stream of light soared into the sky from the airship. Like fireworks, it directly exploded in the sky, forming a strange pattern of a beast's head. That was Milina's signal. Only by sending this signal would the Baruba Empire's barrier be opened. Only then would outsiders be able to enter the city. In fact, it was a signal used by the Moma family to communicate with each other. It's just that it's been used by the Baruba Empire's 3 major families to open the barrier. As expected, the guards let down their guard after seeing the signal. They sent someone to contact the people controlling the barrier. 5 or 10 minutes later, an entrance that was just big enough for Fraxinus to pass through opened. On the city wall, some of the city guards began to make hand gestures to guide Fraxinus's arrival. Kotori didn't act alone. She had the Misaka sisters, who were controlling Fraxinus, follow the directions of the city guards and enter the barrier at a constant speed. Originally, there was an oasis between the two mountains. The Baruba Empire was built on top of this oasis. Because of this, the interior of the Baruba Empire's capital was no different from a normal city. It had the usual streets and roads, unlike the yellow sand outside. Of course, there was also a floating plaza for airships to land and take off. After Fraxinus entered the barrier under the guidance of the city guards, 4 airships flew over from the floating plaza and stopped in front, behind, left, and right of Fraxinus. Like a prisoner being escorted, they led Fraxinus to the floating plaza and landed there. When Fraxinus landed, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miku, Origami, and Yoshino brought Milina and 5,000 Misaka sisters out of the airship. They instantly filled up the floating plaza and gave the city guards another shock. "Why you?" A middle-aged man who seemed to be the leader glanced at the girls with vigilance. "Which city are you from?" "I am Milina of Garas. Milina of the Emoma family." Milina quickly stood up. "I have an important matter to discuss with His Majesty." Chapter 1927. The Baruba Empire's Royal Palace. In the central hall of the palace, the most prestigious figures of the Baruba Empire were all gathered here. It was said that all of the influential figures in the Baruba Empire were gathered here, but there were also some young people in their teens and 20s. They were all direct descendants of the Baruba Empire's royal family and the 3 great clans. Those who could stand here were all destined to become leaders of the royal family and the 3 great clans. At this moment, these people were lined up neatly in 2 rows, surrounding a round table in the middle and standing at the corner of the hall. The people sitting at the round table were the ones with the most authority in the Baruba Empire. The leader was the Emperor of the Baruba Empire, Gutta. Sitting next to him was the most prestigious prince of the Baruba Empire, the one who was supposed to be the next emperor, Jafar. Other than these 2, there were 3 other old men in their 50s and 60s. They sat on the 2 seats to Gutta's left and the one next to Jafar. Sitting first to Gutta's left was an old man with a face full of wrinkles and long black hair that reached his waist. He was the head of the Baruba Empire's number 1 clan, the Morma family, and a rank 9 powerhouse of the council, Kaluan. Sitting second to Gutta's left, next to Kaluan, was another old man with a frown on his face. He seemed to be dissatisfied with something. He was the head of the Vance family, the 2nd clan of the Baruba Empire, and a rank 9 powerhouse of the council, Will. Sitting next to Jafar, who was the last seat at the round table, was an elder who had his head lowered and seemed to be deep in thought. He was the head of the Mani family, the 3rd clan of the Baruba Empire, and a rank 9 powerhouse of the council, Gubai. These 5, including Jafar who was still developing, were the most respected figures in the Baruba Empire, second only to the emperor. Apart from these 5 people, like the current heads of the 3 great clans, they didn't have the right to sit, so they obediently joined the 2 rows at the side of the hall and stood at the front. They looked like they were waiting for orders. From this, one could see the difference between the Baruba Empire and the Ailu Empire. First of all, among the people who were allowed to enter this hall, there were almost no women, and even if there were only 2 or 3 people bustling about. One could only imagine how strict the Baruba Empire's preference for males was. Second, status, class, and so on were also clearly distinguished. Those with status and the right to speak could sit in the 5 seats at the round table. Those with lower status could only obediently stand in the 2 rows. Moreover, the order of the rows was also very particular. The higher the status, the closer to the round table. Those with lower status were directly at the back. The people of the Baruba Empire didn't seem surprised by the fact that there was a clear hierarchy that favored males. However, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mikoto, Origami, and Yoshino, who were standing in the center of the hall, didn't seem to think much of it. Therefore, the group of young ladies did not behave like Milina, who was explaining in fear and trepidation. They kept their backs slightly bent, and even straightened their legs. Instead, they stood in scattered groups, and behaved as they did in the past. Although they were talking about the past, only Kotori kept sucking on her lollipop with a nonchalant look on her face. Kurumi kept standing there with her head tilted to one side with a faint smile. As usual, she had an enchanting yet mysterious look on her face. As for Origami, she still had an expressionless face. Toka, on the other hand, was standing there uncomfortably with a dissatisfied look on her face. Yoshino, on the other hand, was cowering behind Toka, holding her hand tightly. Obviously, he was still affected. However, Toka and Yoshino were fine. At least they weren't used to it. Miko, on the other hand, was frowning. Her beautiful eyes flashed with anger from time to time. The Baruba Empire favored males over females. Therefore, those who could obtain higher status were mostly men. Naturally, those who could enter this hall were all men. Unfortunately, Miko hated men the most. Therefore, with Meijio's unscrupulous personality, it was already very fortunate that she was able to hold back from flipping out when she was being sized up, scrutinized, amazed, and brazenly scanned her body from head to toe. With Melina's explanation, time passed bit by bit. Everyone present was already very surprised when they heard that Melina had led the experts from the city she was in charge to set up an ambush. When they heard that there were traitors among them, their faces were filled with rage. However, when they heard that there were other traitors in the capital, even Gudda could not help but be moved, let alone the people around him. He almost stood up. "Is what you said true?" Gudda looked at Melina with a sharp gaze. "You should know that if you lie, it will be a serious crime, right? Please, please, please believe me, Your Majesty." Melina endured Gudda's sharp gaze, gritted her teeth, and bent down again. These lords were there at the time. They witnessed everything with their own eyes. Hearing this, everyone's gaze once again gathered on the group of girls. There were still some who were sizing them up, some who were scrutinizing them, some who were stunned, and some who blatantly swept their eyes over the girls' bodies, causing the girls to frown one after another. Other than Jaffer, who had some interaction with Wu Yen in the Spalier World Academy, everyone including Gudda couldn't help but have a look of suspicion on their faces. The people here were all people with status. Naturally, they had more or less heard of this group of girls. Gudda couldn't help but think of the young Rank 9 powerhouse he met on the Emperor Island. His expression softened and his tone relaxed. "Ladies, is Melina's matter true?" Among the group of girls, Kotori, who had a calm and sharp mind and was also the commander of Ratatoskr, was unsurprisingly the leader. Naturally, it was Kotori who stepped forward. Kotori didn't try to verify Melina's words. Instead, she spoke of what she was certain of. "I don't know if Melina's news is true or not. However, when I arrived, there were indeed 2 Rank 8 powerhouses who wanted to kill Melina. Thus we saved her." Hearing this, many people frowned. However, this time, they frowned because of Kotori's way of speaking. "Woman, pay attention to your way of speaking." Then, someone's voice rang out. "The one asking you is the Emperor of the Baruba Empire. It's already a great favor that we don't ask outsiders to bow to us. Don't think you have the right to be rude." As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere of the whole place changed. If the atmosphere before was heavy, then the atmosphere now was tense. The kind that could explode at any moment. It was as if everyone agreed with that voice, as if it was a matter of course. They began to look down on the group of young girls with a gaze that they thought was a matter of course. It was obvious that they were the masters of this place. Of course, in the eyes and hearts of the group of young ladies, such an action was nothing more than pure idiocy. Kotori couldn't help but sneer and turn her head away. Meijio scoffed in disgust. "A bunch of gorillas who only know how to train their muscles want to learn etiquette from humans?" Everyone's expression changed. Even Gudda puckered his brows. Jaffer was the only one who cursed inwardly. In the Baruba Empire, it was deeply ingrained in their minds that females were inferior to males. Wasn't Jaffer also hostile towards Sylph, because she was more talented and powerful than him? Therefore, in the eyes of the people here, being offended by a group of little girls was simply the greatest humiliation to them. Buzz? In the next instant, apart from Gutta, Jaffer, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi, who were the 5 highest decision-makers, everyone else secretly circulated the combat aura in their bodies. They turned their auras into pressure that enveloped the group of girls. Chapter 1928. BZZZ. The high-ranking officials of the Baruba Empire unleashed their combat aura and turned it into a pressure that pressed down on the group of young ladies. The entire palace began to tremble. Compared to the Ailu and Faya empires, the Baruba Empire wasn't only different from the Baruba Empire. It was also different from the Baruba Empire's beast battle techniques. Its purpose was to mimic the attacks of dire beasts and their ferocious fighting style. It was truly unique in terms of attack power, defense, specificity, uniqueness, and so on. It was far superior to all the other combat techniques that belonged to the Baruba Empire. The beast battle techniques didn't refer to a specific battle technique, but rather a whole system of battle technique. Just like how all spells that used fire to attack were called fire spells, in the Baruba Empire, battle techniques that mimicked the attacks of vicious beasts and their fighting styles were called beast battle technique. Naturally, there were good and bad beast battle technique. For example, Melina's beast battle technique that allowed her to summon the shadow of a scorpion was a high-level beast battle technique. Jaffar's beast battle technique that allowed him to summon the shadow of a blood-colored beast was one of the top beast battle techniques in the Baruba Empire. As for Magnubi's beast battle technique that contained the power of lightning, it was definitely one of the top beast battle techniques in the Baruba Empire. It could even be said that it was Magnubi's beast battle technique. The reason why he explained so much was because he wanted to make things clear. Not only were there good and bad beast battle techniques, but they were also the most popular battle techniques in the Baruba Empire. Because of this, mages needed to cultivate more than warriors. In the same rank and level, mages were generally stronger than warriors. Logically speaking, mages should be more important than warriors. But because of the beast battle techniques, the Baruba Empire valued warriors more. Therefore, other than the fact that men were superior to women, the Baruba Empire also respected warriors. Under such circumstances, one could only imagine. The number of warriors in the Baruba Empire was much more than mages. Therefore, the Baruba Empire officials in the palace were all powerful beast battle skills, and the beast battle skills they practiced were all high-level beast battle skills. Therefore, the Baruba Empire officials in the palace were all powerful beast battle skills, and they were all high-level beast battle skills. The only thing that filled the hall of the palace was fighting spirit. There was no magic. Behind each of them, there was also a ferocious and huge beast shadow. There were almost all kinds of beast shadows. In this way, the palace hall looked like it was surrounded by roaring ferocious beasts. At this very moment, these ferocious beasts were roaring towards the sky as they released a powerful pressure. It was as if they were carrying a heavy mountain as they ruthlessly pressed towards the center of the hall. Immediately, Melina, who was not far away from the group of girls, felt her shoulders sink and her face turn pale. With a pause sound, she directly knelt on the ground. The officials around her were all members of the royal family and the 3 great clans. The older ones were all powerhouses of the 8th step, while the younger ones were all talented geniuses of the 7th step, at the very least. When these people released their pressure together, a mere 8th step powerhouse like Melina naturally couldn't bear it. However, in the face of such pressure, apart from the cowardly Yoshino who shrunk her neck slightly, the rest of the girls didn't even change their expressions and endured it. No, it wasn't that their expressions didn't change. At the very least, Toka and Mijo's faces showed traces of anger. Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami's eyes also turned cold. To be honest, the girls didn't think that they could rely on their group of 9th step powerhouses and the 5,000 Misaka sisters, who were all 8th step powerhouses, to show off their might in the Baruba Empire. From start to finish, their performance couldn't be said to be average, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. However, since he had used the excuse of women and lack of manners as a matter of course, but in fact, it was an extremely absurd reason to make the young ladies bow and scrape, then he was being shameless. Against such people, the girls strictly carried out the principles that Wu Yen had mentioned more than once. We don't provoke others, but if others provoke us, we will trample them under our feet. At that moment, no matter if it was Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Mijio, or even the cowardly Yoshino, all of them channeled the spiritual powers that belonged to elves in their bodies and circulated them quickly. Even though Origami wasn't an elf, she also secretly activated Mordred's magical power generation device and circulated the generated magical power. A circle of faint radiance emanated from her body. Boom! Like a resounding drum, the air trembled abruptly. An aura that was more powerful, majestic, dense, and heavy than the ones released by the Baruba Empire's upper echelons erupted without any warning. Under this powerful pressure, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups were like a shoal of sharks. They were swallowed up one bite at a time, breaking free from their master's control and going on a rampage. Like Milina, the Baruba Empire's upper echelons turned pale, as though they had suffered a heavy blow. Many of them groaned and took a heavy step back. The pupils of Gutta, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi, who had been staying silent, suddenly shrank. Disbelief appeared on their faces when they saw the group of girls suddenly erupt with a terrifying pressure. Jaffer even had a look of shock on his face. This level of aura wasn't something that a powerful being in the 8th step could release. At the very least, the 5 highest decision-makers of the Baruba Empire had never seen a powerful being in the 8th step who could release such an aura. In that case, it was obvious what level these young girls were at to be able to release such a level of pressure just by standing there. 9th step. 6 9th step powerhouses. None of them were older than 20 years old, and one of them didn't even look 15 years old. Impossible! Impossible! The old patriarch of the Baruba Empire's number 1 Emoma family, Kaluan, muttered absent-mindedly like a crazy old man. It's impossible for there to be such young 9th step powerhouses. Is this a lie? Will's expression changed drastically. Even if you're joking, there should be a limit. 6. Gubai's lips trembled. 6 9th step powerhouses who aren't even 20 years old? Jaffer was even more astonished. When did they become so strong? Even Gutta was at a loss. It wasn't just the 5 highest decision-makers of the Baruba Empire, even the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were in disbelief as they watched the young ladies release such powerful auras. Even their breathing became labored. As time passed, the auras of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were completely swallowed up by the young ladies' auras. The beasts behind them also became illusory, looking like they could collapse at any moment. Their master's face turned pale and red. Breathing became more and more difficult, and his chest became more and more stuffy. Even cold sweat flowed down his forehead. In the end, Jaffer, who had dealt with Wu Yen before and knew how incredible the young ladies beside him were, was the first to calm down. Father! Gutta was also startled awake. He saw the faces of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire changing between red and white. Stop! Kotori and Kurumi revealed different degrees of ruthlessness. Toka, Mijio, Origami, and Yoshino lifted their heads in understanding. Not only did the group of young ladies not stop, but they also collectively raised their auras to a whole new level. Pucci! 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 In the next instant, all the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire in the hall spat out mouthfuls of blood. Amidst the howls of agony, some fell to their knees while others collapsed to the ground. You! Gutta, Kaluan, Will, and Gubai slammed the table and stood up. The Emperor of the Baruba Empire had spoken out to stop them, but not only did they not listen, they even went from bad to worse. Just based on this point alone, Gouda could get the entire Baruba Empire to take down these 6 young ladies. The atmosphere in the hall turned heavy instantly. Chapter 1929. If anyone from the Baruba Empire was here, they would definitely be shocked by the scene in front of them. This was because, in terms of status, talent, strength, status, and background, these people who were more powerful than anyone else in the Baruba Empire were currently lying on the ground like they were terminally ill. There was even a pool of blood in front of them. As for the emperor and princes of the Baruba Empire, as well as the Type 9 powerhouses of the 3 great clans, all of them stood up, their faces filled with anger as they glared ahead. However, for the Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire to treat them so seriously and with such anger, it was actually 6 young girls who had not even reached adulthood yet. How could such a scene not be shocking? What was even more shocking was that the 2 sides clearly didn't seem to be comparable at all, but the air was filled with a heavy atmosphere of being evenly matched and confrontational, causing everyone to be puzzled even after thinking about it for a long time. Of course, only those who were not present would be confused. If they were present and saw the entire process of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire coughing up blood, then it would be understandable. The reason was that those seemingly young girls were all experts who didn't reveal their true strength. Type 9 powerhouses. All of them. At this point, Gouda, Kuluan, Will, and Gubai stared at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the rest of the girls, their eyes filled with uncertainty. No matter how much these 4 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire did not want to believe that the power they had spent their entire lives to obtain was now in the hands of a group of girls who were not even 20 years old, they had no choice but to accept this fact. Right now, there were 6 Type 9 powerhouses standing in front of Gouda and the rest. This was the truth. If both sides were to clash, the Baruba Empire would definitely be at a disadvantage. After all, only Gouda had reached the mid-Type 9 realm, while the other 3 Type 9 powerhouses were all at the initial Type 9 realm. This way, even if these girls were all initial stage Type 9 powerhouses, they only needed to send 3 of them to deal with the 3 Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire. The other 3 ganged up on Gouda. At that time, even if Gouda was a mid-Type 9, he would not be able to take on 3 Type 9 powerhouses. Once Gouda was defeated, the other 3 Type 9 powerhouses would join in. It was only a matter of time before the other 3 Type 9 powerhouses from the Baruba Empire were defeated. In terms of numbers, the Baruba Empire no longer had the upper hand. As for those below the 9th stage, that would be even more of a joke, because that wouldn't be called taking action, but rather throwing away one's life. Even if they really did make a move, it would cause a large number of casualties. That was absolutely unwise. It was precisely because of this that Kuluan, Will, and Jebi froze after slamming the table and standing up. A gloomy and hesitant expression also appeared in Gouda's eyes. Father! Jafar, the only one who remained calm, looked at his father and shook his head. Everyone could tell what he meant. Gouda also calmed down and took a deep breath before speaking solemnly. What is the meaning of this? The moment he opened his mouth, he regretted it. Wasn't this a case of the guilty party complaining first? Shouldn't we be the ones saying that? As expected, Kotori's face revealed a mocking smile as she replied rudely. Your Majesty of the Baruba Empire, what is the meaning of this? It was obvious that the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were the ones who made the first move. Kotori and the rest were just retaliating. We were just exercising our rights. While Gouda was at a loss for words, Kuluan glared coldly at Kotori. At least he had some foresight, to be able to tell that Kotori was the leader of the group. Do you really think that the Baruba Empire is some weakling that you can offend? Offend? Kurumi tilted her head and smiled sweetly. Then, can you explain in simple terms, how did we offend you? This time, even Kuluan was at a loss for words. He couldn't possibly tell her that in the Baruba Empire, It was considered an offense if a woman didn't show her respect to a man. That was only effective when a man was stronger than a woman. Although the Baruba Empire had a culture where men were superior to women, they didn't treat women like slaves. At most, they subconsciously thought that women were weak. Otherwise, a woman like Milina wouldn't have been recognized and given a city to manage, even though she had a certain level of strength. Were the girls in front of him weak? It was because of this that the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire were forced to lie on the ground. Therefore, this reason was complete nonsense, at least to those who weren't from the Baruba Empire. Seeing that Gutta and Kaluan were at a loss for words, Weir spoke up with a frown. If that purple-haired woman hadn't insulted us, this wouldn't have happened. Don't you want to admit it? That's right. Gubai chimed in and pointed at Meijio. That woman insulted us. That's the truth. Meijio was about to explode when she heard this, but she was interrupted by Origami's lukewarm words. If you want to pursue the matter, it seems like someone was the one who provoked us in the beginning, right? Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino nodded furiously. Although Meijio's words were a bit vile, the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire, who looked down on women from the bottom of their hearts, weren't any better. Enough, there's no point in saying anything more. Seeing that Kaluan, Weir, and Gubai still wanted to say something, Kurumi closed her eyes and smiled. You should know that the fault isn't with us. It's with the way the Baruba Empire thinks. You're only trying to suppress us because you don't want to embarrass the Baruba Empire, right? Kaluan, Weir, and Gubai didn't know what to say. Their faces paled. Kurumi was right. If the people of the Baruba Empire want to look down on women, that's your business. We have no intention of standing up for women. Kotori looked straight into Gutta's eyes with a fiery glow. However, if this makes you think that we're the same as the women of the Baruba Empire, that we have to bow our heads to you, then we don't mind proving to you whether you have the right to make us do this. The faces of the 5 leaders of the Baruba Empire changed at the same time. How sad. Kurumi used a seductive tone to say the most hurtful words. An empire bound by the ideology of men being superior to women. If you think men should be superior to women, why don't you think about the principles of the Spalier world? The principles of the Spalier world? Gutta and the rest were stunned. Even the leaders of the Baruba Empire were stunned. Don't you understand? Kotori scanned the men around her and said word by word. The strong are supreme. Everyone held their breath. Their faces stiffened. They couldn't say a word. That's right. In the Spalier world, status wasn't decided by gender. It wasn't status, background, or wealth. It was strength. As long as one had absolute strength and became a powerhouse, what status, background, and wealth couldn't be obtained? In the eyes of a true powerhouse, an ordinary concept was completely useless. As long as one was a rank 7 powerhouse, he could easily resist an army of 10,000 rank 5 powerhouses, not to mention the rank 8, rank 9, and even the demigod level, as well as the divine level that had never appeared again. Otherwise, how could the creator of the 3 empires be a divine-ranked fighter? How could the creator of the 3 empires be a divine-ranked fighter? In the Spalier world, a powerhouse had the right to surpass any royalty. The strong are supreme. These 4 words summed up the principles of the Spalier world. It also showed how shallow the concept of men being superior to women was. The Baruba Empire's people were furious, but they couldn't find any words to retort. They could only hold it in. The atmosphere grew heavier. Kotori pursed her lips. For the time being, let me pass on the news that I should pass on to you. Chapter 1930. What did you say? When Kotori finished, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi all cried out at the same time. The guardian deity is not in the palace but sealing the Beast King in the capital of alternate generations. Father! Jaffer couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up abruptly and stared at Gutta, who was silent and had a dark look on his face. Is the guardian really not in the palace? Gutta didn't say a word. His silence was equivalent to a tacit acknowledgement of the accuracy of Kotori's information, which made the faces of the Baruba Empire's upper echelons turn pale. The Baruba Empire's demigod guardian wasn't in the palace, but the enemy had a beast king. Although it was only a pseudo-demigod, it wasn't something a Class 9 powerhouse could compare to. It was said that the strong reigned supreme in the Spalier world. A rank 7 powerhouse could stop an army of 10,000 rank 5 powerhouses. If it was a pseudo-demigod, it could easily wipe out 10,000 rank 8 powerhouses. Of course, if it was a rank 9 powerhouse, they wouldn't need to mobilize so many people to stop a pseudo-demigod. But were rank 9 powerhouses so common? Even if Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Meijyo, Origami, and Yoshino were included, the Baruba Empire would only have 10 rank 9 powerhouses. 10 rank 9 powerhouses. The strongest among them was only a mid-rank 9 powerhouse. The rest were all beginner rank 9 powerhouses. There was no way they could stop a pseudo-demigod. The higher-ups of the Baruba Empire had always thought that the guardian deity was in the palace. They also thought that the one who led the magical beast army to attack the Baruba Empire was the pseudo-divinity Beast King, who had been severely injured by Violet and was now sealed away. That was why they had been so relaxed, even when they heard that a large group of human traitors had sneaked into the palace. But now, the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire finally realized just how perilous the situation they were in. This was a crisis that could destroy the Empire at any time. "Your Majesty," Kaluan asked in a questioning tone. "Your Majesty already knew that the guardian deity wasn't in the palace, right? Why did he keep such an important matter a secret?" "So what if I did?" Gutta looked at Kaluan coldly. "Can you think of a solution if I tell you?" Korin clenched his teeth tightly, and his face grew paler and paler. Indeed, even if Gutta were to announce the absence of the Protector to the public, it would be useless. Not only would that not have any beneficial effects, but it would also cause the people of the Baruba Empire to waver and cause their morale to plummet. After all, the guardian deity was not around. However, the other party had a pseudo-demigod expert. The war the Baruba Empire was fighting wasn't really a war. It would be better to say that it was a deathbed struggle. Even if they managed to defeat the demonic beasts, the Baruba Empire's capital would still be destroyed as soon as the demigod Beast King joined the fray. This was the effect of being a strong cultivator. Therefore, the Spalier world had always believed that the strong were the most important, not the royalty. In front of the strong, the royalty was nothing. The current situation proved this point. The guardian god is not here, but the enemy has a pseudo-demigod expert. Not only that, the previous Beast King has actually advanced to the pseudo-demigod level. Even the combined efforts of 5 pseudo-demigod experts could only seal him. Will sighed. If that's the case, even if we do have a way to deal with the Beast King, as long as the pseudo-demigod Beast King breaks out of the seal, the Spalier world will still be finished. It's not just the Spalier world, even the Baruba Empire is in danger. Gubai laughed bitterly. Don't forget, didn't Milina say that there are traitors in our capital? The guardian deity was not here, but the enemy had a pseudo-demigod expert. Even if they had a way to deal with the pseudo-demigod Beast King, there was still the pseudo-demigod Beast King that all the demigods in the Spalier world could only barely seal. Not only that, but there were also traitors hiding in the capital. Each of these 3 factors could lead to the destruction of the Baruba Empire and the entire Spalier world. Originally, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups did not think that they would lose the war against the demonic beast. The Baruba Empire's desert terrain was advantageous for the Baruba Empire's citizens to fight. The capital was also located in a natural stronghold. Compared to the demonic beasts that had left the behemoth forest to attack, the Baruba Empire had too many advantages in this war. If that was the case, how could they possibly lose? But now, the Baruba Empire's higher-ups had finally fallen from their absolute confidence to the bottom of the abyss. If this continued, the Baruba Empire would definitely be destroyed. Father, Jaffar's voice was a little hoarse. What should we do now? In the hall, all the upper echelons looked at Gouda in confusion, which made Gouda pull himself together. A demigod beast king isn't something we can come into contact with or deal with. We can only place our hopes on the 5 demigods and Lady Purple from the capital of alternate generations. Now we must focus on the enemy before us. Gouda's calm voice rang in everyone's ears. No matter what, the news of the guardian deity not being in the capital cannot be leaked. Otherwise, if the guardian deity and his army of demonic beasts find out, they will come personally. We will not be able to stop them. The Baruba Empire's higher-ups nodded. Gouda took a deep breath, his eyes cold. Secondly, the traitors in the capital are a huge threat. We must find a way to drag them out. Otherwise, the capital will fall into their hands sooner or later. At this point, Gouda looked at Kaluan, Will, and Jebi. Since the betrayers came from other cities, they are either small fries who can't do anything, or they are members of your 3 clans. The 3 of you will be responsible for finding them. That's right. You must find all of them. Zhang Lixing sneered. That's right. Kaluan, Will, and Jebi's expressions turned serious. The rest of the Baruba Empire's higher-ups were also on edge. Yes. Seeing this, Gouda nodded and turned to look at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still looked at the big picture and sighed. This is a moment of life and death for the Baruba Empire. I hope that everyone can let bygones be bygones and help the Baruba Empire. When Kotori explained the situation of the 5 demigods and the pseudo-demigod Beast King in the Spalier world, she also revealed her own trump card. 5,000 powerhouses that could exhibit strength of the 8th level. This was definitely a great help. With the help of these 5,000 8th level powerhouses, at the very least, there was no possibility of losing in the war against the magical beasts. On top of that, these 6 girls were all Type 9 powerhouses. They were already more powerful than the Baruba Empire. Gouda would have to be out of his mind to think that men were superior to women and force them to give up such a huge help. The rest of the upper echelons of the Baruba Empire also thought of this point. They lowered their heads in sullenness. He had thought that they were just a bunch of pretty women. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, these women had turned into existences that even the Emperor of the Baruba Empire would have to seek help from. This made the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire, who had just made things difficult for the Baruba Empire, feel awkward and ashamed. They were afraid that the other party would hold a grudge. If they let this huge help slip away right before their eyes, many of them would regret it so much that they wouldn't be able to sleep. It had to be said that the actions of these people did indeed make Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls especially unhappy. However, the girls still knew the severity of the matter. The survival of the Baruba Empire didn't matter, but the pseudo-demigod Beast King was a real threat. If they couldn't delay the other party, and let them discover that the pseudo-demigod Beast King was sealed, they would definitely change their target and attack the capital to rescue the pseudo-demigod Beast King. That was what the girls were truly worried about. In order to prevent the capital from being destroyed, the girls would take the initiative to attack and delay the 3 Beast Kings. Thinking of this, the girls nodded. The upper echelons of the Baruba Empire let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 1931. Sigh. After leaving the central hall of the Baruba Empire's palace, Toka sighed as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. Ah, hey. Siwan, who had been tightly grabbing onto 10 fragrance sleeves and had a pitiful expression as if he had been bullied, spoke with some concern. No one would have thought that he was a 9th level expert. Miss Toka, are you hungry again? Yes. Yes, I am indeed a little hungry. 10 Fragrance first rubbed her lower abdomen that did not have a trace of excess fat before shaking her head. And I feel a little tired. Tired? Kurumi looked at 10 Incense with a surprised expression. This is really strange. Toka's not exactly a lively person, but she's definitely a cheerful one. Therefore, in the past, when 10 Fragrances was tired, he would only sigh when he was hungry. It was indeed quite strange. Because those people inside are really too annoying. 10 Fragrances wrinkled her little nose. Although I don't know why I feel that they are very annoying, but every time I see their eyes, I feel very annoyed. As expected of Miss Toka, I feel the same. Meijio nodded in agreement. Those men's gazes are really annoying. It's as if they treat people as snacks. They eat and throw them away as they wish. It's really unpleasant. No, I must take a shower when I get back. My skin feels rough after being stared at for so long. Although, I'm not as annoyed as Miss Toka and Meijio. Force said shyly. But, I don't really like those people. Well, I can understand your feelings. Kotori crossed her arms. The lollipop in her mouth seemed to have melted, leaving only a tube. She held it in her mouth like a toothpick. To be honest, I really want to leave. But even if it's for the otherworldly capital, it's fine. We have to stop the fake Beast King who led the attack on the Baruba Empire's beast army. So, let's endure for now. Endure? Origami asked without changing his expression. How long should we endure? It's up to you. Kotori replied casually. Anyway, if you can endure it, then endure it. If you can't, then don't endure it. As long as they don't mess with us. Let's take it as though we were on an unpleasant excursion. But if you come knocking on my door, then don't be polite. Don't be so courteous. Is that so? The fourth boneless one looked a little timid. Are you going to fight? Looking at fourth shaman who seemed to be a little scared, except for the new member. Aside from Meijio and the slow-witted Toka, Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami, who didn't know much about the 4 Kino's past, all of them came to their senses. The group of girls had almost forgotten that before she met Wu Yen, this doll-like, petite girl in front of them was a girl who was so kind-hearted that even if someone wanted to kill her, she wouldn't want them to feel pain from the bottom of her heart. She wouldn't blame anyone, let alone hate anyone. Even if someone wanted to kill Yoshino, Yoshino would not hold a grudge and would even think for this person. Now, if he told Yoshino that if someone came to find him, he should not be polite, Yoshino would probably feel very embarrassed, right? It seems a little difficult for fourth shaman to do all this. Kotori looked at Toka. Toka, I'll leave fourth shaman in your care. No problem. Toka perked up and said confidently. I won't let fourth shaman be bullied. I want to protect the cute fourth shaman too. Meijio immediately came over and hugged her sister-in-law, rubbing against her smooth cheek. Fourth shaman, let me protect you well. From the beginning to the end. From the inside out. Yuwa! The group of girls gradually walked away amidst the banter. They did not notice that at this moment, at the entrance of the central hall, 2 pairs of eyes were watching them. It's a middle-aged man in his 40s and a young man in his 20s. If Lena was here, she would definitely recognize this middle-aged man and young man. That middle-aged man is the current head of the Baruba Empire's number 1 family, the Moma family, and Lena's teacher, Mans. As for the youth in his 20s, he was Man's son, Kaluan's grandson, and the young master of the Morma family, the number 1 family in the Baruba Empire, Isaac. The 2 of them stood in the same spot and stared at the group of girls who were fooling around as they walked away. Only when the group of girls had completely disappeared did they withdraw their gazes. A Tier 9 powerhouse. Mans covered his chest that was still in pain from vomiting blood due to the counterpressure of the girl's aura in the hall. A trace of gloom appeared in his eyes. How can a group of young girls reach such a level? As the head of the Moma family, Man's strength has reached the bottom line of the heads of the 3 major families. He's weaker than the 9th shaman in his family, but stronger than the others. He's at the peak of the 8th shaman family. Come to think of it, it's been 10 years since Man's reached the peak of the 8th shaman family. 10 years ago, when Mans had advanced to the peak of the 8th Order, Kaluan had given him the position of Patriarch. During the 10 years he had been the Patriarch, Mans had never slacked off on his cultivation. Even so, for 10 whole years, Mans had not been able to cross the threshold and advance to the 9th Order. Hence, when he saw that the young and beautiful girls had all reached the realm that he had always dreamed of, Mans felt a little indignant and helpless. His tone was full of complicated emotions. "Don't worry about it." Of course, Mans wasn't the only one who felt complicated. Isaac also looked in the direction the girls left, his eyes filled with uncertainty. They were only at the 8th Shaman family when they were in the academy. It hasn't even been half a year since they graduated. From the 8th Shaman family to the 9th Shaman family in half a year? If they're at the peak of the 8th Shaman family, then it's understandable. After all, there's only one step between the peak of the 8th Shaman family. This step is so far away that it's despairing. At the very least, Mans hasn't been able to cross it in 10 years. However, if you want to say it's simple, it's also very simple. It's hard to say when you'll cross it. As the young master of the Emoma family, the #1 family in the Baruba Empire, Isaac was also a student of the Silveria World Institute. He was also the leader of one of the 12 strongest factions in the Baruba Empire. Therefore, he was familiar with the group of girls. In Isaac's opinion, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino were only at the 8th Shaman family when they were still studying at the academy. They were far from the peak of the 8th Shaman family. It's unbelievable that they could reach the 9th Shaman family in half a year. Of course, no matter who it is, it'd be strange if they weren't suspicious when they saw a group of young girls at the peak of the 9th Shaman family. "Hey, father." Isaac's eyes flickered. That Wu Yen reached the 9th Shaman family at a young age. Now, these girls by his side have also reached the 9th Shaman family. Say, do you think this capital of a different generation has a method to quickly reach the 9th Shaman family? Hearing this, a glint flashed in Man's eyes. Obviously, he had the same idea. When Wu Yen reached Tier 9 in his 20s, he was already considered the youngest Tier 9 in history. Now, there are Tier 9 individuals younger than him popping up one after another. Moreover, they are all close to the youngest Tier 9 in history. It's hard not to be suspicious of him. Mans turned his head and looked at his son. When he saw that his son's eyes were filled with infatuation, greed, dominance, evil, and other possessiveness as he watched the group of girls leave, Mans smiled. Of course, Mans knew what his son's plan was. But he didn't object. In fact, he approved. As long as Isaac succeeds, it'll be a great benefit to both the Moma family and himself. Mans patted Isaac's shoulder. "Do what you want." With his father's support, Isaac's eyes immediately lit up and he nodded excitedly. His gaze became sharper as he looked in the direction where the group of young ladies had left. It was like he was looking at something that belonged to him. Chapter 1932. Within the palace of the Baruba Empire's capital, there was a spacious resting area that was specially reserved for guests from the outside. This resting area was to the east of the palace. Not only was the environment beautiful, but it was also surrounded by a verdant bamboo forest. There were also extremely luxurious halls and courtyards. The air was even filled with a fragrance that came from an unknown place. Anyone who smelled it would feel refreshed, and there was no way to find fault with it. This vast resting area was also divided into 3 areas according to the identity, status, and strength of the guests. The first district was provided for those powerhouses or forces with a small reputation. Generally speaking, only those with strength of the 8th Order and a certain status would be able to stay here if they came to the palace as a guest. The second district was reserved for those who were at least at the peak of the Type 8 realm and had a background not weaker than the 3 great clans of the Baruba Empire. Only those with a good reputation would have the qualifications to stay here. For example, the 3 great clans of the Ailu and Faya empires would stay here when they visited. The third district was the most luxurious place in the palace for VIPs. Those who could live here were either royalty of the Ailu and Faya empires. For example, Kate and Sylph were the most popular princesses in Silveria. They were also the most powerful beings in Silveria. That is, a ninth-stage powerhouse. Those who fit these two criteria were few and far between in the Spalier world. In terms of status and power, they were on par with the emperor of the Baruba Empire. They were truly honored guests. Normally, they wouldn't even visit the Baruba Empire's royal palace. Thus, the third section of the resting area was always empty. There were very few people who could stay here. But today, one of the villas in the third section had finally welcomed its own residents. Although it was only temporary, the villa's size was obvious. In terms of size, it was comparable to Guda's palace. Not only did it have a large hall, it also had many bedrooms. There was also a side room that was specially used for training or practicing battle skills or magic. It was well equipped. However, who were these girls? Even though Kotori and Origami were just ordinary kids in the dating battle world, and their houses were also the size of an ordinary family, Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino were all elves living under a fence. Their living conditions were definitely not as good as this villa. But it wasn't like the girls hadn't stayed in a good place before. Kotori had lived in a luxurious suite in Ratatosker's headquarters that was even more luxurious than this villa. Origami had also participated in a special training session with the higher-ups as a member of AST and enjoyed the treatment of the higher-ups. They had stayed in a villa on Dokdo Island. Plus, one of them was the commander of Ratatosker and the other was indifferent. A villa, no matter how luxurious it was, couldn't stir their emotions. Kurumi, Toka, and Yoshino had also stayed in a luxurious villa as special students in the Spalier World Academy. Hence, they weren't surprised by this villa. As for Meijio, she was even more surprised. Unlike the other girls, this popular idol singer was a real missy. Her house in the date battle could no longer be described as a villa, but a luxurious mansion. Therefore, nothing special happened when the girls moved into this villa. When the sky turned dark, the girls gathered in the hall on the first floor to discuss the matter of the pseudo-beast king. Unlike Shokuho Misaki's party, Kotori's party didn't have anyone with Pandora mode like Astria. She didn't have anyone with peak tier 9 strength like Astria. Even with Astria's help, Shokuho Misaki's group still had to resort to poison and ambush to kill the pseudo-beast king. That's why Kotori's group couldn't do anything to the pseudo-demigod beast king if they didn't come up with a strategy. However, only Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami participated in the discussion. Meijio wasn't the smart type. She was even a little naive. Yoshino was too pure and kind to participate in the discussion. As for Toka, there was no need to mention Toka. If Meijio isn't the smart type, then Toka isn't the smart type. She's a complete idiot who can't come up with any good ideas. While Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami were discussing the battle strategy, Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino could only sit on the side and kill time. At this time, Meijio was happily teasing Yoshino and Yoshino. She enjoyed Yoshino's cute performance when she panicked, blushed, and her heart raced. She also enjoyed Yoshino's playful and funny performance. After a while, she turned her head and looked at the unhappy Toka. She tilted her head. "Miss Toka, are you still hungry and tired?" "Of course not." Toka pouted. "I'm just thinking about what Shoujo is doing right now." Toka isn't sure if it's just her imagination, but Kotori, Kurumi, and Origami's discussion seemed to have quieted down when Shoujo was mentioned. "Brother Shoujo?" Yoshino blinked her cute eyes. Meijio almost fainted from her cuteness. "Miss Toka, are you thinking about Brother Shoujo?" It's not that I want to." Shixiang's pretty face turned slightly red as she stammered. "I should say I'm feeling a little lonely. Or I miss Shoujo's cooking. There are various reasons." Hearing Toka's hesitant, embarrassed, weak, and perfunctory words, the group of girls shook their heads and laughed. Miss Toka, there's no need to worry about my dear. Meijio puffed out her almost invincible chest. Her tone was full of confidence and pride. Even if it's in another world, my dear must be very active. Maybe it's doing something very powerful that we don't know about. When it comes back, my dear will deal with all the demigod and demigod beast kings. I'm sure he's active. On the side, Kotori coldly interjected and told the girls just how much she cared about this topic. Or rather, I'll be surprised if he's willing to settle down. Miss Kotori, you're not telling the truth. Kurumi spread her hands. It was a casual action, but it had an indescribable beauty to it. Miss Kotori, you must be missing your brother, right? Who's missing him? Kotori raised an eyebrow and curled her lips in disdain. I hope he doesn't return. Before Kotori could finish her words, the surrounding girls all cast curious and mocking gazes at her. Kotori's disdainful expression froze, and she couldn't continue her sentence. Instead, she revealed an angry expression. Why are you looking at me like that? Shoujo said. Origami's voice was emotionless as usual, but the content of her words almost made Kotori explode. You're acting like a tsundere. You're the tsundere. Kotori was going crazy. Your whole family is tsundere. Alright, Miss Kotori is going to get angry if we keep talking. It's getting late, let's get some rest. Kurumi stretched and yawned cutely. We won't be able to come to a conclusion today, let's continue tomorrow. Kotori snorted but didn't object. The other girls nodded as well. Just as the group of young ladies were about to return to their respective rooms to rest, a series of knocks suddenly sounded at the door. The girls were surprised at first, then they looked at each other. They don't know anyone in the Baruba Empire's palace. Some of them are even on bad terms. Who would come looking for them in the middle of the night? I'll go open the door. With such doubts in mind, Kotori stepped forward and opened the door. The figure standing before the door stunned Kotori and the group of young ladies. It's a young man they don't know. Judging from the luxurious decorations he's wearing, he doesn't seem like a normal person. The girls thought he was a servant. The person who came was precisely Isaac. Chapter 1933. Standing at the entrance of the villa, Isaac looked at Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino, who were looking at him with surprise. Although he had a smile on his face, his heart was burning with passion. He couldn't help it. The group of girls in front of him had the best looks that Isaac had ever seen in his life. He couldn't help but be tempted. Let's not talk about Toka for now. This girl who was looking at him with a surprised expression had a dreamy appearance that others would only see in their dreams. Her long purple hair that naturally hung down to her shoulders and waist was tied into a ponytail that burst out like water under the binding of a bowknot-like hairband. Her clear eyes reflected an indescribable and inconceivable color. That appearance that even a goddess would be jealous of was enough to snatch away a person's sight, attention, and even heart in an instant, revealing an extraordinary beauty. Who wouldn't be tempted by such an unbelievably beautiful girl? Even if there were no other factors causing trouble, Isaac was certain that if he had the chance to get close to her, it would be worth it no matter what price he had to pay. Standing closest to Toka was Origami. When Isaac first laid his eyes on this slender girl, he felt that she was very special. Her short white hair, which could almost touch her shoulders, was soft and cold. She was like a doll, just like an artifact that had been measured. Her upright and pretty face had an exquisiteness that was not inferior to 10 fragrances. Although there was almost nothing called expression on her face, compared to the former, the latter's coldness was also extremely attractive, especially to Isaac. After all, as a former student of the Spalier World Academy, Isaac had seen Sylph's cold beauty up close more than once. She was the idol of the entire academy, and her cold elegance could captivate the hearts of all students. It was impossible for Isaac to not be tempted by a girl like Sylph, who had extraordinary talent and a strong background. Unfortunately, Sylph didn't seem to be tempted at all. Isaac, who had been itching to pursue her, couldn't find a single flaw. Now, Isaac saw Origami's cold and elegant beauty that was similar to Sylph. How could he not be excited when he saw Origami, who once harbored evil intentions towards Sylph? Compared to Toka and Origami, Meijio didn't have an outstanding temperament, but her appearance was slightly more mature. Her dignified and beautiful face was extremely alluring. However, what was even more alluring was Meijio's flawless body that no one could find fault with. It could even be said that no one could compare to her body. If one could embrace that body, what kind of softness would that lucky man be filled with? It was a fatal temptation that made one's breath quicken. Of course, even though Meijio's appearance and figure were top-notch, what really intoxicated Isaac was her voice. Her voice was the voice of a true angel. Ever since this girl appeared in front of Isaac in the central hall of the palace, she had only said one sentence that was extremely insulting to men. However, when she said that sentence, her voice was like poison, and Isaac was completely addicted to it. Isaac could even imagine that if she used this voice to moan with a man, it would definitely be an unparalleled pleasure for the man. Toka, Origami, and Meijio. The three different girls all had the capital to make men unable to stop. If it wasn't for the fact that the three girls also had the terrifying strength that made no one dare to take half a step into the lightning pool, Isaac wouldn't have been stingy with using some despicable means to take the three girls into his pocket. Isaac believed that even if there were women in the world who could be compared to Toka, Origami, and Meijio, he wouldn't be able to find anyone who could surpass them in terms of attractiveness. However, Isaac now realized that he was wrong, and very wrong. There were women who were more attractive to Isaac than the three of them. It was that girl who stood in a dark corner and seemed to have all the light in the world focused on her. Her beauty was breathtaking. It was a beauty that could make one's body tremble. Her jet-black waist-length hair was tied into two bundles, hanging obediently in front of her body. Her skin was as white as a pearl, and the slight exposed part of her neck gave people the feeling that it would break with just a little bit of force. The young lady's bangs covered more than half of her astonishingly beautiful face, and even one of her eyes was covered. However, Isaac couldn't help but thank the girl for covering one of his eyes. Because Isaac was actually a little scared. He was scared that the girl's eyes had a charm that was even more alluring than the girl's beautiful appearance. Isaac felt that as long as he saw the girl's covered eyes, he would completely fall at her feet. He would no longer be able to struggle free from her breathtaking beauty. Of course, if it was just in terms of appearance, Kurumi was only on the same level as Toka, Origami, and Meijio. What made Isaac almost lose himself in Kurumi's attractiveness was her temperament. It was as sweet as an angel's and as dangerous as a demon's. It just so happened that Isaac was infatuated with this contradictory yet challenging temperament. Thus, he fell for Kurumi's attractiveness. As for Kotori and Yono, although they were still a little immature in some areas, one was as beautiful as a work of art and the other was as cute as a doll. When they grow up, they wouldn't be inferior to the other four girls. The rare beauties in the past were now standing within his reach. He only had to stretch out his hand and he would be able to touch them. Each of them was comparable to Sylph, whom he once admired. The fire in Isaac's heart was unimaginable. Even if it was any other man, as long as he had a normal sexual orientation and aesthetic standards, he wouldn't be able to avoid the same reaction. Moreover, these girls were all far more talented and powerful than Sylph, who dominated the Spalier World Academy for many years. Isaac's eyes almost turned red when he thought about how he could win their hearts. 6 Tier 9 powerhouses. That's already more powerful than the Baruba Empire. After all, even the Baruba Empire only had Gudda, Kuluan, Will, and Gubai on the surface, wasn't it? Moreover, the other party might have a way to quickly reach the Tier 9 realm. As long as he could obtain the hearts of these girls, not only would Isaac be able to possess 6 extremely beautiful girls with extremely powerful battle prowess, He would also be able to raise the status of the Emoma family to a level that would surpass that of the royal family. He would also be able to make his position in the family unbreakable. He would also be able to obtain the opportunity to advance to the 9th level. No matter how one looked at it, it was an extremely great temptation. Once he thought of the various benefits, and then took in the group of young ladies before him with their extremely beautiful looks and otherworldly temperaments, Isaac secretly swore in his heart that even if he had to pay a price for himself, he would still successfully take these young ladies into his pocket. Isaac had great confidence in his looks, temperament, achievements, and so on. He was the young clan leader of the Emoma clan, the #1 clan in the Baruba Empire. Furthermore, he possessed the outstanding talent and strength to advance to the peak of rank 7 at the age of 20. Over the years, there were countless talented young ladies who had been toyed with by Isaac. That's why Isaac never thought he would hit a wall. She wondered if Isaac had thought of this before. In terms of background, status, would these girls care about Isaac's background, status when they even dared to take care of Goda? In terms of strength, Isaac couldn't even compare to a single finger of these girls. In terms of talent, he was only at the peak of the Tier 7 realm at the age of 20. Compared to himself who reached the Tier 9 realm before the age of 20, how bad was his talent? In terms of achievements, Isaac couldn't even enter the eyes of these girls. In terms of looks and temperament, were these girls shallow women who would be moved by these things? The answer was no. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that these girls already had someone they couldn't shake in their hearts. This pitiful man who was greedy to the point of wanting to swallow an elephant and never thought about whether he was worthy or not was destined to meet a tragedy. R 1152. Chapter 1934. Isaac didn't even consider that a true 9th stage powerhouse, even if he really lowered his status to take a look at him, could he afford to offend him? True powerhouses had strong self-esteem. Even if they didn't mind that their other half was weaker than them and had a lower status than them, they still had to know their own limit. Since they wanted to pursue an existence that was originally unattainable, then the only right way was to devote themselves to it, right? Isaac, on the other hand, was so greedy that he wanted to win the hearts of 6 girls who were at the top of the Spalier world in terms of appearance, temperament, strength, background, status, and so on. Isn't this the same as a snake trying to swallow an elephant? Of course, this was also the Baruba Empire's patriarchal mindset. In the hearts of the Baruba Empire's men, the status of women was lower than their own. Having multiple wives and concubines was nothing to them. They would never consider whether or not their other half would mind if they were fickle in love. This kind of situation was even more obvious when the person he was pursuing was someone he couldn't even hope to reach. Isaac was confident that he could win the hearts of these girls, but he didn't know that he was already out of the game when he tried to woo 6 girls who were more outstanding than him. On the other hand, the girls didn't know that they were being targeted by someone with bad intentions. Coterie was still in the middle of opening the door. She glanced at the luxurious clothes on him. He didn't look like an ordinary person at all. Isaac had a handsome smile on his face, but his eyes were fixed on her. She raised an eyebrow. "You are? Miss Coterie sure is forgetful." Isaac didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, he spoke in a friendly tone. "You remember Milina, but you don't remember me?" Coterie knitted her brows. Then, she seemed to recall something and nodded in realization. "I remember now. You're the leader of the Emerald Tower, one of the 12 strongest factions in the Spalier world, right? The Emerald Tower is the representative faction of the Mama family in the Spalier world. Isaac and Milina were both members of the Emerald Tower. The difference is, as the young master of the Mama family, Isaac is the leader of the Emerald Tower. On the other hand, Milina, who is stronger and more talented than Isaac, is only a member of the Emerald Tower." Kodori listened to Fei Fei's explanation of each of the 12 strongest factions in Silveria World Institute more than once. After hearing about Isaac and Melina's situation, Kodori was shocked. She even asked about the details with a heart full of doubts. That was only natural. Just like the deadly forest. Lulu is the only daughter of the Lori family headlar. However, he wasn't the leader of the deadly forest. Fei Fei, on the other hand, was only Lar's disciple. This proved that the 12 strongest factions don't necessarily need a direct descendant of the family to be the leader. Therefore, although Isaac was the young patriarch of the Moma family, in terms of excellence, Melina was still more outstanding. Melina even occupied one of the top 10 rankings, while Isaac was ranked after the top 10. This also proved that Melina was the more outstanding side. Logically speaking, Melina should be the leader, not Isaac, right? Originally, Kodori had thought that Isaac was outstanding in some areas other than his strength, such as strategy and foresight, which was why he became the leader. That wasn't surprising at all. However, Fei Fei refuted her on the spot. Compared to Melina, Isaac can't compare to her in anything other than his status. The only reason he's the leader is because of his status and the fact that the Baruba Empire doesn't value women. After knowing this, Kodori no longer paid attention to this man who became the leader because he was the young patriarch of the Emerald Tower. Instead, she had some impression of Melina, who had the strongest combat strength in the Emerald Tower. This was the reason. If Isaac hadn't mentioned it himself, and Kodori had met Isaac a few times in the past, she wouldn't have remembered this man who talked to himself. It's a good thing that Ms. Kodori still remembers me. Otherwise, I'd really wonder if my presence is a little weak. Isaac had no idea that Kodori already had the impression that his status was his only merit. He laughed as if they were close friends. Ever since you ladies graduated from the academy, I thought I'd never have the chance to meet you ladies again. I didn't expect you ladies to visit my country today. I'm really happy. However, it wasn't appropriate for me to show my face in front of His Majesty, so I only came to greet you now. I hope you don't think I'm the one who neglected you. Even someone as astute as Kodori couldn't help but be taken aback by Isaac's polite and friendly words. She couldn't help but mutter inwardly, "Don't tell me all the students from the Spalier World Academy are so friendly to their former classmates? You're being too courteous," Kodori replied in a neutral tone. "Well then, Mr. Isaac, is there anything you need from us?" "Yes." "Well, if you want to talk about something, there is indeed something." Isaac scratched his head as if he was embarrassed. "Actually, I'm here to apologize." "Apologize?" Kodori and the other girls were stunned. "I'm really sorry." Isaac's expression turned serious. "Today, the Baruba Empire did something impolite to all of you because of a small matter. At that time, due to my position, I had no choice but to follow suit. Ever since then, I've felt very bad about it. That's why I've come to apologize. Please forgive my rudeness." When Isaac said this, not only was his expression very serious, but his tone was also very sincere. Although Isaac didn't think that it was rude of him to make a move at that time, it was true that he had come to apologize. He didn't want to leave a bad impression in the hearts of the girls because of some small matter, so he wanted to redeem himself with an apology. In other words, the apology was just a means to achieve his goal. And there's a follow-up to this. Without waiting for the group of girls to speak, Isaac hurriedly spoke. "To express my apologies, why don't I be the guest and treat all of you to a meal? You ladies haven't eaten yet, right? Treat?" Even though Kodori, Kurumi, Meijio, and Origami didn't realize Isaac's true intention, they all furrowed their brows. Even the glutton Toka and the docile Yoshino had the same reaction. There's no other reason, it's just that the girls don't want to eat with strange men when Wu Yen isn't around. At that moment, the Origami head spoke in an extremely calm tone. "I'm not going." Origami did not explain why or reject the request. After expressing her attitude in an unusually concise manner, she did not say another word. Isaac, who thought that the girls had no reason to reject the request, was stunned. "I'm not going either." Miyuki maintained her frown and waved her hand in disgust. "I hate being too close to men." This unreasonable statement made the stunned Isaac's expression change. "I'm not going either." Yoshino spoke in a timid but firm tone. "If it's just a meal. I want to eat here." Toka hesitated between eating and not eating. In the end, she didn't want to get too close to a strange man because of a meal. She shook her head reluctantly. "I'm not going either." "Allah." Kurumi gently caressed his cheek and tilted her head. The flirtatious expression she displayed at that moment made Isaac's heart tremble. However, the words she said made Isaac's heart sink. "I also don't want to eat with a man other than Owner-sama." Owner-sama? Isaac's heart sank to the bottom because of Kurumi's title. Could it be that this beauty already has a master? At the thought of this possibility, not only did Isaac's heart sink to the bottom of the valley, even the look in his eyes turned ferocious in an instant. One had to know that among the group of girls, the one who attracted Isaac the most was Kurumi. However, Isaac did not notice that the trace of savagery in his eyes had finally torn apart his disguise. A cold glint flashed in Kotori's eyes as she observed him. She sneered inwardly. "Looks like my sisters don't want to go out." Kotori smiled. "However, we'll accept your apology. Thank you for your kind intentions, sir." Isaac's face finally darkened. Chapter 1935. Before coming to visit the young ladies, Isaac had made a lot of preparations. He had come up with many countermeasures for various situations in an attempt to gain the favor of the young ladies. Or it had to be said that although Isaac was a little greedy and self-righteous, he did have some skills when it came to wooing girls. It wasn't hard to see how many girls he had harmed. He didn't think that he would be able to win over his target in one fell swoop. He was just trying to gain a little bit of favor for his future plans. Therefore, before coming, Isaac had also thought about the various reactions the girls would have to his visit and had made preparations to deal with it. However, Isaac had thought that the group of girls would put on airs and treat him with contempt or indifference. He also thought that the group of girls would be disgusted with him because of what happened during the day. He also thought that the group of girls would vent their anger on him and vent their anger on him for the treatment they received during the day. However, he didn't think that things would develop like this. Isaac believed that the reason he found for treating them was not stiff or unreasonable at all. He also believed that there was a high chance that he would be rejected. Therefore, in response to the possible answers the group of girls might give, Isaac had also come up with a set of words to convince them. As long as he brought out these words, whether it was because of their pride or because they used to be in the same school, the group of girls would have no choice but to reluctantly agree. As long as they agreed, Isaac had hundreds of ways to make the group of girls see him in a different light, or at least leave some impression and influence. But now, what was the reason that Isaac heard? Not going? What kind of reason was this? She hated being too close to men? This was indeed a reason, but what could Isaac use to convince the other party? Eat here? Wouldn't all of Isaac's previous arrangements be ruined? This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was the reason that Kurumi gave. She didn't want to eat with any man other than her husband. Isaac was absolutely certain that he had heard the words Lord Husband. What did this mean? It meant that the woman he liked was already taken and was even married. Isaac had indeed used his own methods to deceive many young ladies, but as a person of the empire where men were superior to women, men who cared about their status would never ruin their own reputation for a married woman. Therefore, even though Isaac had been a playboy for many years, he had never had the thought of having a relationship with a married woman, let alone pursuing a married woman openly. If Kurumi was really married to another man, Isaac could directly declare that he had failed. How could Isaac, who was full of confidence before, not go crazy with anger? especially when he saw Kurumi tilted her head. Isaac's heart became boiling hot as he looked at her charming and seductive appearance while she gently caressed her cheeks. He roared crazily in his heart. Impossible! She's mine. Mine. Unaware that he had been seen through by coterie, Isaac tried his best to suppress his emotions and put on a smile. But this smile was different from before. It was already a little difficult. Kurumi, Kurumi, Kurumi. Kurumi is already married? Isaac's tone was like stop joking as he tried to cover it up. Kurumi, you really like to joke around, she just graduated not long ago. How could she get married so quickly? This was the only excuse Isaac could come up with to comfort himself. Although Spalier World Academy didn't forbid students from getting married, Spalier World Academy gathered the best cultivation resources in the three empires. Everyone who entered the academy wanted to fight for more resources to cultivate, who would be in the mood to get married. Of course, there were quite a few who were engaged or privately committed to marriage, but the students would still prioritize increasing their own strength. It wouldn't be too late to wait until they graduated before getting married. Thus, there really hadn't been a married student in the academy. Kurumi graduated not long ago. Even if she wanted to get married, she would have to spend a lot of time just to choose a good date. It was a bit of a stretch for her to get married. Although it was a self-comforting reason, Isaac's reason was still reasonable and well-founded. Unfortunately, when she heard Isaac's words, Kwang-san smiled sweetly. Her smile was so big that her eyes curved into crescent moons. Although we're not officially married yet, everything I have has been taken away by him. Isaac's laughter came to an abrupt halt. Kurumi held her cheeks and made a bashful expression. Her beautiful face was flushed red. Even now I still remember those few nights. My husband put me in an embarrassing position, took off my clothes, and licked every part of my body. He even investigated me carefully. Especially that night, my husband was really bad. He didn't give me a chance to speak and impatiently pushed me down. He even used that big thing to penetrate my body. It was really hot. So hot. Such an explicit description was like a huge hammer that hammered into Isaac's heart. Isaac's face turned green, white, red, and black. It was simply wonderful. Kurumi. Ten Fragrance was also embarrassed by Kurumi's words. Her entire face turned red, and she shouted with shame and indignation. You! What nonsense are you talking about? That's right. That's right. Meijio pouted angrily. Just when Isaac thought that Meijio was going to reprimand him, Meijio angrily said such a sentence. I'm so envious. No. I also want to spend a hot night with my darling. Isaac's eyes widened to their widest extent. Could it be that this beautiful girl with a heavenly voice was also taken like Kwang-san? And it was the same person? Wah wah. Wah wah. Four cried out shyly. Miss Meijio. Please don't say any more, Era. Kurumi giggled as she moved her face closer to Yoshino's face. Don't tell me Four Fragrance doesn't want to spend a hot night with husband? A hot night. With a bang, Fourth Bonnie's face turned completely red. She tightly grabbed her hat and covered her head. She no longer dared to show her face to anyone. Seeing this, Isaac's pupils dilated again. Even this person, Kurumi! Ten Fragrance shouted angrily. Her face was still red. Don't say strange things again. That's a pity. Kurumi smiled happily. I wanted husband to dote on Miss Ten Fragrance, but I didn't expect Miss Ten Fragrance to hate husband so much. I don't hate Shoujo. Ten Incense immediately jumped up and shouted without hesitation. I like Shoujo the most. I can't pretend I didn't hear you. Origami couldn't take it anymore and stood up. Her expressionless face turned hostile as she looked at Ten Fragrance. I'm definitely the one who likes Shoujo the most. There's more. Origami turned her hostile gaze to Kurumi. Although I didn't spend a good night with Shoujo, I licked his entire body. Era. Kurumi and Meijio were shocked. Toka and Yoshino's faces turned red. On the other hand, Isaac's body trembled again and again. Every word from the girls was like a fatal blow, hitting him so hard that he staggered back, his face turning green. Kurumi, 10 fragrance, Meijyo, origami, and 4 fragrance. These girls are the best in the world in terms of strength, background, status, appearance, and temperament. They're all taken? And they're all the same person? Well, it's just as you thought. Looking at Isaac's green face, Kotori smirked maliciously and delivered the final blow. By the way, I'm also in love with that person. Not only is he our future husband, he's also the fiancé of Ailu Empire's genius princess, Sylph. Sylph's fiancé? It's him. Wu Yen. Isaac's body began to tremble violently as if he was suffering from epilepsy. The green color on his face had completely turned red. Pfft. Immediately, Isaac spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't take the blow and fell to the ground, unconscious. Chapter 1936. Looking at Isaac, who had completely fainted after spitting out a mouthful of blood and falling to the ground, the group of girls were all dumbfounded. This 10 fragrance, Meijyo, and Siyu Nai, who did not understand what was going on, were completely at a loss. What the hell is going on? Unlike Toka, Meijyo, and Yoshino, who didn't understand what was going on, Origami frowned slightly and understood what was going on. Kurumi blinked her eyes, and the shy expression on her face had completely disappeared. It was replaced with a disappointed expression. Kotori also understood what happened. Unlike Isaac, Kurumi had already guessed Isaac's intention from the very beginning. She had already guessed Isaac's purpose for coming to find them. But that's not surprising. Back in the date battle world, before she met Wu Yen, Kurumi relied on her charm to attract a lot of boys who wanted to hit on her. She lured them to a secluded place and absorbed their time. She used them as a resource to activate her angel. That's why Kurumi was very sensitive to men who wanted to do something to her. It wasn't strange for her to see through Isaac's intentions. That's why she said a series of explicit words to provoke Isaac. Poor Isaac. This time, he really took a huge tumble. Perhaps some people would think that Isaac couldn't take the provocation and vomited blood because a bunch of women he just met today had a man of his own. But if you think about it carefully, it's not an exaggeration at all. Indeed, Isaac had once relied on his own methods to move unhindered among the flowers, toying with countless delicate girls in the palm of his hand. However, that was just the man's possessiveness causing mischief. All of them were just for fun, and there was not a single time where he was serious. That's why instead of saying that Isaac was dominating a field of flowers, it was more accurate to say that he was capable of dominating a field of flowers. On the other hand, Isaac, who had been fooling around all this while, was attracted to Sylph after meeting her in Silveria World Institute. Not only did she manage to reach the 8th Order before the age of 20, she also dominated the entire Silveria World Institute for a few years. She was the princess who was crowned as the strongest student in the academy. She was simply too outstanding. Her appearance alone was the most beautiful Isaac had ever seen in his life. Her cold aura that came from her bones touched the hearts of all the men and women in the Spalier World Academy, including Isaac. On the day he met Sylph, Isaac admitted that it was the first time he was moved by a woman. Plus, Sylph was the daughter of the Ailu Empire's Emperor Kite. Her status was higher than Isaac's. With his possessiveness, how could he not pursue Sylph? It was a pity that Sylph's coldness was genuine. Even though it was fatally attractive to men, it wasn't something they could take advantage of. In the end, Isaac didn't even have the chance to talk to Sylph, even though both of them were in the same academy and were the leaders of one of the 12 strongest factions in the Spalier World Academy. This made Isaac, who thought he was invincible when it came to chasing after women, felt defeated. Fortunately, Isaac wasn't the only one who got snubbed like this. Sylph wasn't the only one who treated Isaac the same way. Even when she spoke to Jaffer and Kaya, she was cold and emotionless. This made Isaac feel a lot better. However, one day, Isaac received a piece of news while he was dreaming about having Sylph by his side. Sylph was engaged. She was engaged to a newbie who enrolled in the Spalier World Academy less than 3 months ago, Wu Yan. This newbie who only enrolled in the Spalier World Academy for less than 3 months managed to make it to the top 5 in the rankings. Even Prince Jafar of the Baruba Empire could only fight him to a draw. This newbie had done what Isaac couldn't even do after exhausting all his efforts over the past few years. The day he got the news, Isaac smashed everything he could find in the Emerald Tower. He even vented his anger on a few members of the Emerald Tower, who came to check out the situation by kicking them out of the Emerald Tower. He hated Wu Yan to the core. However, this newbie, who had no background, no status, not only did he steal Sylph from Isaac, but he also easily defeated Jafar and Kaya, becoming the strongest student in history. Isaac didn't have the guts to seek revenge. Not to mention, this newbie was the fiancé of the Ailu Empire's royal princess. Isaac didn't dare to offend this newbie, so he could only swallow his grievances. Under such circumstances, Isaac found out that all the girls who could compete with Sylph, or even surpass her, had become Wu Yan's women. It's easy to imagine how much of a shock Isaac felt. On top of that, Kurumi used such a blatant method to tell Isaac what kind of relationship the woman he wanted had with the man he hated the most. Isaac only coughed up blood and didn't die. That's already a testament to his mental fortitude. So, as I said from the beginning, this Isaac is a tragedy. Kurumi. Kotori rolled her eyes when she realized Kurumi was trying to provoke Isaac. You're really bad to the core. Era. Kurumi smiled knowingly. Pity? No. Kotori's pretty face flashed a sinister smile. Very good. In just a few words, Kotori and Kurumi's impression of Isaac was on the verge of being revealed. This made Toka, Meijio, and Yoshino very confused. Only Origami glanced at Isaac, who was lying on the ground and vomiting blood and fainted, and said without any ripples, "What should we do with this person?" Well. Kotori turned around and walked inside without looking back. You can decide for yourselves. Hearing this, the group of girls looked at each other. In the end, they all chose to turn around silently. Meijio even closed the door, leaving Isaac, who had fainted and vomited blood, lying on the cold ground alone. His figure was abnormally sad. So what if he's surrounded by a field of flowers? In the end, he couldn't get what he wanted the most. That's the most tragic part. While all kinds of disputes were going on in the royal palace of the Baruba Empire, an unknown scene was playing out in a desolate city about 8,000 meters away. It was a scene playing out in a courtyard at the center of the city. There were 2 figures, one standing and one kneeling. The standing figure had his back to the kneeling figure. The kneeling figure seemed to be saying something, causing the standing figure's eyes to light up. It wasn't until the kneeling figure finished speaking that the standing figure turned around and looked at the person kneeling in front of him. He let out a thunderous voice filled with oppression. "Is what you said true?" "I wouldn't dare lie," the kneeling figure said in fear. "This humble one is telling the truth." "Very good." The figure standing there grinned. It seemed like he was smiling, but it was a sneer. "The Baruba Empire's guardian isn't in the capital. Even the heavens are protecting us beast men." With such a short sentence, the identity of this person became clear. He claimed to be a beast man. A demonic beast. Magical beasts, on the other hand, would only shed their beastly body and transform into human form after advancing to the demigod level. In that case, the identity of this person was obvious. He was the demonic beast king who led the attack on the Baruba Empire. Since this person was the demonic beast king who led the attack on the Baruba Empire, the identity of the kneeling figure was obvious. A traitor. Through some unknown means, he found out that the Baruba Empire's demigod guardian wasn't in the capital and leaked the information to the Beast King. Now, the Baruba Empire is in real danger. That traitor is a traitor. The figure standing there disappeared without a sound. Tomorrow, I will personally annihilate the Baruba Empire's imperial city. Such a sentence disappeared along with the sound of the wind, making the storm in the desert seem even more violent. It was like a warning of tomorrow's bloody storm. R 1152. Chapter 1937. The next day, when the scorching sunlight poured down and once again visited the monotonous desert with only one color, the chilliness of the night almost instantly disappeared without a trace. All the heat that belonged to the desert filled the entire desert, causing the air to slightly distort. If someone were to walk in this desert, their vision would be distorted as well. The Baruba Empire's capital city, located between the two towering mountains, welcomed new guards. They replaced the guards who had been guarding the city for an entire night. The guard in charge of the shift was a middle-aged warrior in his 30s or 40s. He was clad in sturdy armor. As soon as he led the guards to the top of the city walls, the middle-aged warrior called out to a bare-chested, burly man who seemed to be in charge of the guards. "Hey, buddy, it's time to change shifts." "You're here?" The burly man withdrew his gaze from the distance and looked at the middle-aged warrior. There was a trace of dissatisfaction on his face. "You're half an hour late today." "Well, it's only half an hour. I'm not sleeping in." The middle-aged warrior waved his hand casually. "I could have made it in time. Who knew there would be some strange rumors in the city this morning? I was intrigued. By the time I snapped out of it, I was already late." "Strange rumors?" the burly man asked curiously. "What rumors?" "Rumor. There are two rumors." The middle-aged warrior didn't try to hide it. He held up two fingers. "First, it is said that when the palace servants were patrolling, they accidentally overheard some of the higher-ups saying that the little girls who entered the palace yesterday seemed to have tripped them up and injured all the higher-ups in front of His Majesty." "Bah!" The burly man spat out a mouthful of saliva with a face full of disdain, and said contemptuously, "A group of girls injured all the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire? You believe that?" "Rumor. That's why I said it was a rumor." The middle-aged warrior huffed. "That group of lasses should be the lass who boarded that strangely shaped airship into the city yesterday and appeared at the floating plaza with a large group of scantily clad women, right?" "That's right. That's right." The brawny man nodded. "I was also at the floating plaza at that time, so I saw it very clearly. Those scantily clad women are really strange." The middle-aged warrior frowned. "It's not like our Baruba Empire doesn't have bolder and more flamboyant outfits, but it seems like they've been staying in the city since yesterday. I heard that there's even an area in the city that's been set aside for them. Why? It's indeed a little strange. It's just a group of women who haven't even reached adulthood yet. Why would they specially empty an area for them to live in? Couldn't he just make some arrangements? Was there something special about them?" The burly man pondered for a moment before speaking. "What's the second rumor?" "The second rumor is a bit like that," the middle-aged warrior said sneakily. "I heard that this morning, there were servants in the palace who found an unconscious man lying in a pool of blood in the resting area provided for distinguished guests. Moreover, that man seems to be the young patriarch of the Mo family." "You mean that Isaac?" the brawny man said in surprise. "Why would he be in the resting area, and lying unconscious in a pool of blood?" "Who knows?" the middle-aged warrior gloated. "I heard that the young patriarch often flirts with women. Perhaps he took a fancy to one of them and went to flirt with her at night. In the end, he ran into a nail and was taught a lesson." This time, the brawny man believed him. "That's true. The resting area of the palace is basically filled with people with great backgrounds. This Isaac must have offended some royal family member and was left there for an entire night. Because I was interested in this, I ended up arguing with someone in the city and forgot about the time." The middle-aged warrior chuckled. "It's not too late. Let's change shifts now." "All right." The brawny man jumped down from his high vantage point and shouted at the guards who were still on alert. Change shift. Everyone returned to the city to rest. Yes. Only then did the guards relax. One by one, they twisted their stiff bodies and rushed back to the city noisily. Amidst the noise, most of the conversations were like this. Sigh, I don't know when these days of waking up to guard the city, and going to sleep after guarding the city will end. I hope His Majesty and the others can quickly find a way to deal with the magical beasts and set us free. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. I've already decided. After repelling the magical beasts, I'll rush back to my hometown and get married. Go back to your hometown and get married? That's right. Even though she's the girl my parents picked for me, I heard that she's gentle and virtuous. She's very lively. Haha, my wife has been pregnant for almost 10 months. I reckon she'll give birth after repelling the magical beasts. I've also decided. After the war with the magical beasts, I'll retire and stop cultivating. I'll just live an ordinary life. If Wu Yen was present and heard the conversation of the guards, he would definitely fall off the city wall. Go back to his hometown and get married? His child is about to be born? Retire and stop cultivating? F***ck, these were all death flags. If they raise death flags now, even if the guards aren't the ones who will die, they'll still die, right? Could these pitiful defenders really survive the war between the humans and the magical beasts? Facts have proven that even in the Spalier world, death flags are heaven-defying. Rumble. When the city guards who had been guarding the city wall for a whole night were about to walk off the city wall, a series of tremors and quakes gradually came into effect, causing their footsteps and faces to freeze at the same time. Roar! 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 The air that was distorted by the scorching sunlight had turned into waves of air amidst the familiar roars. It swept across the desert like tornadoes, rolling up yellow sand and gradually filling the air with a sandstorm. On the horizon far away from the royal city of the Baruba Empire, the desert became chaotic. Sand, dust, and smoke rolled up like a dense fog. Listening to the roars in the air, feeling the vibrations in the air and the ground, and looking at the dust and smoke in the distance in front of Royal City, the city guards finally thought of something and looked at the horizon in front of the city. Then, the expressions of the city guards changed. He saw a large group of densely packed magical beasts that were charging over like mad bulls. They were roaring as they struggled to move their limbs that were constantly sinking into the yellow sand. They were charging over in a frenzy. That was not all. In the sky, a swarm of flying magical beasts that looked like locusts were also braving the heavy sandstorm and storm to stabilize their bodies, flying over amidst their inherent roars. From the looks of it, these flying magical beasts would probably reach the skies above the capital in another 10 minutes. Thus, the city guards were in an uproar. The magical beasts are attacking. The middle-aged warrior and the burly man finally reacted and yelled in unison. Don't panic. Get into formation. Prepare to defend the city. Hearing that, the city guards calmed down and immediately formed rows of troops, spreading out on the city walls. The warriors raised the bows in their hands, while the spellcasters gripped their magic staffs tightly. They were fully focused, preparing to face the magical beast army head-on. It wasn't as if the Baruba Empire hadn't been attacked by the magical beast army over the past few days. The Baruba Empire had taken advantage of the terrain and the boundaries to fight against the magical beasts, forcing them to retreat. Therefore, after the initial panic, the city guards had completely calmed down and were prepared to carry out the impregnable defense as usual, repelling the attacking magical beasts once again. If the magical beasts continued to attack as usual, then, with all kinds of disadvantages, they would return empty-handed in the end. However, today was destined to break the deadlock. Swoosh! Before the magical beast army reached the attack range of the city defenders, a loud sound of something tearing through the air attracted the attention of all the city defenders. When the city guards saw the source of the sound, they were all dumbfounded. R 1152. Chapter 1938. Whoosh! With a piercing sound, a black shadow broke through the clouds of flying magical beasts with the speed of a meteor, stopping in the air above the Baruba Empire's capital. Just like that, it floated there, looking down. The black shadow was, in fact, a human silhouette. It was because of this human silhouette floating in the air, looking down at the Baruba Empire's capital, that the city guards were stunned. In the Spalier world, there were only two kinds of people who could fly. The first kind were warriors and magicians who trained in magic that allowed them to float or fly. The other kind were those who broke through the barrier of the 9th rank and reached the demigod rank. Apart from these two types of existences, other people would have to rely on tools, miraculous medicines, special armaments, and other external objects such as airships. Otherwise, they would only be able to achieve similar feats. For example, powerhouses of the 8th and 9th order could rely on micromanipulation of their do-chi and mana to allow themselves to hover in the air, achieving a feat similar to flying or hovering. However, in the end, it was only similar, and there was no way to maintain it for a long time, nor could it be used flexibly. It would even consume a large amount of do-chi and mana. Therefore, in the Spalier world, the only ones who could truly float or fly were those who had cultivated techniques or spells with such effects, or were demigod-level powerhouses. Now, seeing a person hovering in the air so stably, the guards who were at least rank 7 could be sure that he was truly hovering and flying, and not using any similar means. Therefore, the person hovering in the air was either a demigod, or a demigod, who had practiced some sort of technique or magic that had the effect of hovering or flying. The city guards hoped that it was the former and not the latter, because the other party had just brazenly flown out of a large swarm of flying magical beasts like a swarm of locusts. Since the flying magical beasts didn't attack him, and even let him pass, it meant that he wasn't on their side. He was an enemy, and if this enemy was a demigod-rank powerhouse, then the city guards could be certain. Today, the Baruba Empire's capital would definitely face an unprecedented crisis. Unfortunately, while the city guards were still staring at the sky in a daze, Lin Fan's expression changed drastically. The figure floating in the air mercilessly extinguished the hope in their hearts. The figure floating in the air raised one of his hands, and a black radiance that looked like a corrosive gas surged out and gradually condensed. Without even saying a word, the figure floating in the air threw down his hand as if he was throwing something. The corrosive gas like black radiance immediately shot down from the sky like a waterfall. Whoosh! The black waterfall rubbed against the air like a meteorite that broke through the atmosphere. Not long after, it landed on the rippling barrier around the Baruba Empire's capital. Boom! Following a thunderous sound, a violent shockwave swept out from where the black waterfall landed, spreading in all directions. Pung! The barrier of the Baruba Empire that could withstand the attacks of hundreds of Type 8 powerhouses could not even hold out for a second, as it shattered with a loud crack. Following that, the black waterfall continued to descend on the Baruba Empire's capital without slowing down. Pung! Like an atomic explosion, the Baruba Empire's capital was engulfed in a violent shockwave and a thick cloud of dust. Screams and cries of panic rang out from within the capital. When the shockwave and dust dissipated, the Baruba Empire's capital was once again exposed to the sunlight. However, at that very moment, the city that was said to be the most sturdy and fortress-like had undergone a great change. The walls that were covered with spikes like a hedgehog piled up on the ground like broken tiles. The buildings that were originally intact completely collapsed like dilapidated houses, gradually becoming history amidst the smoke and fire. Even half of the palace was blown away. It was slanted and looked like it could collapse at any time. This was not the worst. The worst was none other than the city guards in Royal City. Some of these people had already been buried under the rubble, some were stacked together and fell to the ground like garbage, some were still letting out painful groans, and some were simply motionless, their lives unknown. This scene was like hell. Hong. Not long after, the palace collapsed as well. However, before that, a few figures flew out from within and avoided the collapsed palace. They landed on the ground in a scattered manner and looked at the scene around them. Some of the figures began to tremble all over. These people were naturally the only ones who had the ability to protect themselves from this terrifying attack. They were the Stage 9 powerhouses. Gura, Kuluan, Will, Jebi, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino. Apart from these 10 people, no one else was unharmed. Even Jaffer had been carried out of the palace by Gura. However, Jaffer was also heavily injured and had fainted. As for the Type 9 powerhouses who had the ability to protect themselves, no matter how bewildered they were, when they saw the hellish scenes in the city, all their emotions were suppressed. Gura, Kuluan, Will, and Gubai all turned pale. King City. Kuluan seemed to have lost his soul. His eyes were unfocused and his limbs trembled. King City has been destroyed. Will and Gubai's faces were also filled with bewilderment and helplessness. Everything happened too quickly and simply didn't give people the chance to react. A second ago, everyone was still doing their own things in the palace. The next moment, they were greeted with a world-destroying attack. If it wasn't for the fact that the group of 9th-level powerhouses all sensed a trace of danger and promptly raised their defensive measures, they absolutely wouldn't have come out unscathed. Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, as well as Yoshino, who couldn't bear to watch this hellish scene, all looked towards Kotori. Just as they were about to say something, they noticed that Kotori was looking at the sky solemnly. Their faces turned cold as they looked up. Only then did they notice something. In the sky, a person was floating in the air. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He was wearing a beast hide, with long, blood-red hair that reached his waist. Not only did he have a pair of blood-red wings on his back, he also had a long tail with a hook. At a glance, it was actually a scorpion tail. This man with a pair of blood-red wings and a scorpion tail, as well as a head full of blood-red hair, floated in the air above the capital of the Baruba Empire, looking down at the Type 9 powerhouses below with a disdainful look. His voice rang out like thunder. "Humans, your time of death has come." Hearing this, Gura and Kotori felt a chill run down their spines. To be able to call Gura and Kotori humans, to be able to float in the air and destroy the Baruba Empire's capital with a wave of his hand, there was no need to guess who this person was. "It's you." Gura stared at the red-haired man. "Beast King. To be able to survive my attack, humans, you have the right to know my name." The red-haired man laughed disdainfully. "Xie Ming. This is the name given to me by the great beast god. Xie Ming." Gura grit his teeth as he hugged the unconscious Jaffer. He suppressed the anger in his heart as he spoke coldly. "To think that you would come out personally. Aren't you afraid that the guardian of my Baruba Empire will turn you into ashes?" "Turn me into ashes?" Xie Ming laughed mockingly. "Let's not talk about whether the guardian of your Baruba Empire has the ability to turn me into ashes. Human, why don't you get your guardian to come out and spar with me?" Gura still wanted to bluff, but he was suppressed by Origami's calm words. There's no point in saying anything more. Since the other party came out personally, he must have known that the guardian isn't in the capital. Gura, Kuluan, Weir, and Jebi's hearts sank. Kotori glanced at the four of them, her casual words causing their hearts to tremble. "You have failed in your duties." Chapter 1939. Dereliction of Duty. Indeed, dereliction of duty. As mentioned earlier, the betrayers were experts who escaped from the destroyed cities of the Baruba Empire and surrendered to Dark Scorpion in an attempt to save their own lives. In the end, they snuck into the capital and betrayed the human race to work for the magical beast. These traitors who came from other cities could only be ordinary cultivators who were born and developed in this city, Or they could only be people like me, Lena, who were sent by the three great families to manage this city. Even if the ordinary cultivators snuck into the capital, they wouldn't be able to do anything without background, status, or identity. That was why the traders from the three major families were the ones they needed to be wary of. Yesterday, the upper echelons in the palace hall were all people with extremely high status and authority in the three major clans. People like them couldn't be sent to other cities. Not only would it seem like they were being exiled, it would also be a waste of their talent. That was why Coterie made everything clear in front of so many upper echelons. There were two reasons for doing so. Firstly, it was impossible for these high-ranking officials to be traitors since they were not transferred from other cities. Secondly, the traitors were mostly from the three major clans, and their identities and numbers were unknown. It was impossible to rely on a group of girls or a limited number of people like Gutta to secretly find them. They could only rely on these high-ranking officials to act together. That way, it would be much more efficient to find the traitors. They had to get rid of the tumors as soon as possible. Of course, by revealing such important information in front of so many people, the chances of the news being leaked would be much greater. At that time, it would cause even more trouble. But in the end, after careful consideration, Coterie decided to reveal it. After all, if she didn't do this, it would be hard to find the hidden threats, and sooner or later, the Baruba Empire would be dealt a heavy blow. She believed that Gutta understood this as well. That was why Coterie told Gutta everything that had happened. She also had the intention of letting Gutta clean up the mess himself. And the facts proved that Gutta was indeed the emperor of the Baruba Empire. Gutta had already guessed the reason why Coterie had revealed the information so openly. That was why he solemnly ordered that no one was to reveal what they heard in the hall to anyone. After leaving the hall, he ordered his personal guards to keep an eye on the higher-up. He had to keep all the secrets in the mouths of the higher-ups. However, since Xie Ming had personally taken action, it proved that there was still a flaw in Gu Da's secret arrangements, and the news was lost. That was why Coterie said that she had failed in her duty. Gutta naturally knew what Coterie meant. For a moment, he was filled with self-blame and guilt. That's not right. Suddenly, Kaluan seemed to have realized something. The higher-ups who attended the meeting yesterday were all secretly monitored by His Majesty's personal guards. If they leaked the information, the personal guards would definitely report it to His Majesty. That's right. Will pointed at the group of girls and shouted angrily. The only people who aren't being watched by the guards are you. As soon as these words came out, the air immediately filled with an oppressive feeling. Era. There was a smile on Kurumi's face, but there was no smile in her eyes. Are you suspecting us? Then can you prove that you are innocent? Gubai said coldly. You're the only ones who aren't being watched. Toka and Meijio, who were rather angry at being suspected, wanted to say something, but were stopped by Origami and Kurumi. There's no need to argue with them. Coterie didn't even look at Gutta, Kaluan, Will, and Gubai. Instead, she explained to Toka and Meijio. Let them be. Our goal is only Xie Ming. The survival of the Baruba Empire has nothing to do with us. You! Kaluan, Will, and Gubai glared angrily at the group of girls. Before they could say anything, Gutta stood up with Jaffer in his arms. He lifted his head and looked at Xie Ming, who was watching them fight amongst themselves with interest. He spoke in a deep voice. How do you know that the Guardian isn't in the capital? You want to know? The corners of Xie Ming's mouth curled up. There's no harm in telling you. Although I don't know who leaked the news, the human who brought the news to me said that he has a good friend who seems to be working for some king. Last night, he got drunk with him and said that the guardian deity is not in King City. At this moment, everyone understood. The one who leaked the information wasn't the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who were being watched by the guards. Instead, it was someone in the guards. Perhaps Gouda didn't expect that it was the guards he sent to spy on the higher-ups of the Baruba Empire who leaked the information. Perhaps this was the so-called impossible-to-guard-against situation. Who leaked the information to you? Kaluan didn't apologize to the group of girls who were suspected by them. Instead, the veins on his forehead bulged and he growled. I'm going to tear that traitor into pieces. You want to kill the human who brought the information to me. Xieming waved his arm as though he wasn't interested. Then you can search the rubble around you. Maybe you can find it. Wah! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. At Xieming's words, they finally remembered that the traitors were all still in the capital. In other words, Xieming had attacked them as well. You! Will clenched his fist. Didn't you accept the traitors' surrender? So, didn't I give them a chance to live? Xieming nodded matter-of-factly. As long as they live, I won't kill them. Although I just made the decision. Despicable! Gubai cursed without hesitation. As expected, magical beasts can't tolerate humans. That's not necessarily true. Xieming laughed out loud. If the great Lord Beast God decides to let the humans live, we will still restrain ourselves a little and keep the humans as livestock instead of killing them all. Bastard! This time, even Gouda bellowed. The Guardian won't let you go. You'd better take care of yourselves first. Xieming sneered and spread his arms. Come, my brethren! Roar! Roar! Gur! The charging magical beast army finally arrived at the scene. They trampled mercilessly on the rubble of the city walls, charged into the ruined capital, and pounced on the fallen city guards. Even though Xieming said that he wouldn't kill the traitors as long as they survived, he only said that he wouldn't kill them and didn't say that he wouldn't allow the magical beasts to kill them. If he allowed the magical beast army to go on a killing spree, none of the dying humans would survive, right? Swish! All of a sudden, in one of the corners of the capital, a series of ear-piercing sounds echoed. The magical beast army that pounced on the city guards came to a halt and looked over. Not far away, streams of light flew out from the rubble. The streams of light were surrounded by a protective shield made of green crystals. That was the Tertori, domain at will. These streams of light were none other than the 5,000 Misaka sisters. The Misaka sisters who cast the Totori, domain at will, all flew over and landed behind Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, and Yoshino. Their identical appearances and strange outfits stunned Xieming and surprised Gouda and the others. That was because these Misaka sisters, who could only exert the strength of a level 8 expert, were also unscathed. This was something that even the peak level 8 powerhouses in the capital couldn't do. There are actually so many humans who are unscathed? And they're as weak as ants? Xieming frowned for a moment, but his expression soon relaxed. That's good too. My brethren can have some fun too. On the other hand, Gouda, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi were overjoyed. With 5,000 level 8 powerhouses around, they could at least stop the magical beast army and protect the city guards of the Baruba Empire. However, Gouda and the others' plan was too perfect. Origami's cold words sent them into the abyss. Everyone, return to Fraxinus. Gather and await orders. Gouda, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi were stunned. Chapter 1940. Compared to the endless horde of magical beasts, if 5,000 Misaka sisters were thrown into the horde of magical beasts, they would be drowned by the saliva of each magical beast. It would seem that the Misaka sisters would not be of much use. However, numbers were not everything. Even though there were only 5,000 Misaka sisters, which was nothing compared to the horde of magical beasts, each of them could unleash the power of a level 8 magical beast. If one were to count carefully, even though the magical beast horde was innumerable, there were only 3,000 to 4,000 level 8 magical beasts, which was even fewer than the Misaka sisters. As mentioned earlier, a level 7 powerhouse could easily stop a group of 10,000 level 5 powerhouses. In terms of level 8 powerhouses, A level 8 powerhouse could also stop a group of 10,000 level 6 powerhouses. Therefore, if the 5,000 Misaka sisters were to join the battle, the magical beast horde would definitely be stopped if the level 9 magical beasts didn't join the battle. At that time, the defenders of the Baruba Empire would have enough time to wait for reinforcements and retreat from the battlefield. Even though the Baruba Empire's capital had been destroyed, as long as there were still people who could fight, the Baruba Empire would not be destroyed. At least, that was what Guda, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi planned to do. However, Guda's group of 4 was completely dumbfounded by Origami's order. Everyone returned to Fraxinus and await orders? What was the meaning of this? This question didn't last long before Guda and the others came to their senses and understood the meaning of the origami phrase. Origami's meaning was very simple. She wanted the Misaka sisters to retreat. Wait! Kaluan was the first to shout. We can't retreat. Kodori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, and Shiba ignored Kaluan's shout. Origami was the only one who looked at Kaluan with a calm gaze. The calm expression in her blue eyes made Kaluan's heart skip a beat. Origami's words were also very simple. Why? Why? Before Kaluan could say anything, Will shouted impatiently. Isn't that obvious? If you retreat, what will happen to the survivors in the city? Survivors from King City? Origami's face was calm, but every word he said struck a chord in the hearts of the Baruba Empire's leaders. What does that have to do with us? What do you mean by that? Gubai shouted furiously. Are you trying to run away? As soon as Gubai's voice fell, the group of girls suddenly turned their heads and stared at Gubai. Whether it was Kodori and Origami, Toka and Meijio, or the 4 Bakufu, all of them made Gubai's body tremble. Kurumi's eyes were filled with killing intent and hostility, causing Gubai's pupils to shrink and his body to tense up. Perhaps you high and mighty people have gotten used to giving orders, or perhaps the Baruba Empire has already treated women as servants. Kodori spoke in an emotionless voice. However, I must remind you that we are not your servants, but the lifesavers that you begged to stay behind. Only then did Kaluan, Will, and Gubai realize that their tone just now was too much like an order. They were speechless. However, it was as Kodori had said. The 3 of them were Type 9 powerhouses and were used to giving orders. Due to the Baruba Empire's patriarchal culture, they had gotten used to seeing women as lower than themselves. Originally, Kaluan, Will, and Gubai wouldn't have used such a tone in front of people of similar status. But the strange thing was that these girls were really too young, not giving off the feeling of being unfathomable powerhouses of the 9th step. Thus, out of habit, Kaluan, Will, and Jebi exposed their deep-rooted way of doing things. But you guys can't just retreat like that. Kaluan hurriedly spoke up. Aren't we on the same side? Era. Kwang San lightly covered the corner of her mouth. Her smile was slightly sinister. First, you suspected us, then you gave us orders. Now that we're in danger, you still dare to say that we're on the same side? I didn't expect the Type 9 powerhouses of the Baruba Empire to be so thick-skinned. Kaluan, Will, and Gubai wanted to say something, but before they could, Kodori waved her hand. I've said it before, the Baruba Empire's survival has nothing to do with us. Kodori declared without mercy. The moment you started suspecting us, our partnership was already over. Since you never thought of respecting us, there is no need for us to protect you. The Baruba Empire brought this upon itself. You have no one to blame but yourself. Kaluan, Will, and Gubai's minds went blank and they lost all their thoughts. Cooperation was over? No need to protect them? In other words, these people are not going to make a move? You can't do this. Gubai yelled at the top of his lungs. If the Baruba Empire is destroyed, the humans will lose a huge portion of their strength. How are we going to deal with the magical beast army then? Without the Beast King, the magical beast army will disband on its own. Origami said indifferently, her words shocking K'Lun, Will, and Gubai. And the Beast King will be killed by us. You? Will let out a question that was no different from mocking them. That was to be expected. Xie Ming was a pseudo-demigod powerhouse. Although he wasn't a true demigod, he wasn't someone 5 or 6 Type 9 powerhouses could deal with. Now, the girls were saying that they would be the ones to kill Xie Ming. Wasn't that a joke? Of course, it didn't matter if K'Lun, Will, or Jebi wanted to laugh at the girls. Their previous actions had made the girls give up on the idea of saving the Baruba Empire. Origami continued to give orders. Everyone, retreat. The Misaka sisters didn't say anything. Instead, they activated their thrusters and flew toward the floating plaza where Fraxinus was parked. Wait! K'Lun, Will, and Jebi stared at the Misaka sisters who were retreating from the scene angrily. At that moment Gudda, who had been silent all this time, sighed. Indeed, this is the Baruba Empire's own fault. I was the one who begged you to stay, yet you were treated like this. I even allowed the news to leak. I hesitated when others suspected you, and I didn't choose to trust you. I've long since failed as an emperor. Gudda stood up as he said this. His eyes were filled with determination. Now that things have come to this, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to stop the Beast King. We will take care of the magical beast army ourselves. Your Majesty! K'Lun, Will, and Gubai wanted to say something, but Gudda had made up his mind. You have to bear the consequences of your own actions. Have you lost even this little bit of dignity? K'Lun, Will, and Gubai's faces froze. They lowered their heads and fell silent. Then, they silently stood by Gudda's side and cast their gazes towards the endless horde of magical beasts ahead. Father! Jaffar's weak voice sounded from Gudda's arms. He struggled out of Gudda's embrace and stood up. Leave the people in the city to me. You can focus on the magical beast army. Only then did Gudda, K'Lun, Will, and Gubai's expressions become much better. Are you done? In midair, Xie Ming looked down at the group of people below. You can continue if you're not done. I don't mind waiting a little longer. After all, it's not fun to end it too early, is it? Although Xie Ming said that, he gently waved his hand. Immediately, a few blurs flashed through the air and landed on the ground, appearing before Gudda and the other 3. They were 7 magical beasts that were over 3 meters tall and as large as buildings. 7 magical beasts of the 9th level. Roar! The roars of the 7 Class 9 magical beasts mixed together, turning into a sound wave that blew through the surroundings. It made Gudda, K'Lun, Will, and Gubai become extremely stern. After all, not only did they have to deal with an endless horde of magical beasts, but they also had to deal with 7 magical beasts of the 9th level. R1152. Chapter 1941. Leaving aside how Gudda, K'Lun, Will, and Jebi were going to fend off the 7 level 9 magical beasts and the entire magical beast army, Xie Ming raised his eyes and glanced at the retreating Misaka sisters. He didn't chase after them. Instead, he lowered his gaze and looked at the group of girls standing on the ground. He raised his eyebrows. What? Aren't you going to help them? Xie Ming pretended to be kind and asked. Facing 7 Class 9 magical beasts and an entire magical beast army at the same time, even if the 4 humans are Class 9 powerhouses, it's still very dangerous. Are you done? Kotori smiled and said. You can continue if you're not done. We don't mind waiting for you for a while. After all, Kurong-san laughed along with him. It won't be fun if it ends too early, right? The smile on Xie Ming's face gradually disappeared when he heard the girls use the exact words he had said not long ago. He looked at the girls below with a cold glint in his eyes. Humans, it's not a good choice to anger me. Regardless of whether we anger you or not, you don't intend to let any human life go, do you? Origami said in a colder tone than Xie Ming. Long? Wind? Since we're going to die anyway, why don't you let others anger you? Xie Ming pondered for a moment before he nodded. That's true. Since I intend to kill you all, I'll kill you all. Since I intend to anger you, it's nothing. Humans, do you need me to give you some time to vent? Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Miko, Origami, Yoshino, and the other girls looked at each other and laughed in unison. No need. As soon as he finished speaking, a burst of dazzling light burst out from the girls' bodies. The sudden glare made Xieming frown. He took a step back and dodged the glare that was aimed at his eyes. He turned his head and looked at the center of the glare. At the center of the blinding light, the appearance of the 6 girls had changed completely. Toka's clothes were made of cloth and metal. She was wearing light armor that looked like a princess's dress. The skirt was made up of an incredible light film, as if it was a crystal that was illuminated by various rays of light from different directions. She was also holding a spike-shaped greatsword in her hand. She looked like a princess. She looked like a heroic knight. The clothes on the 4 bunnies had also changed into raincoats that were green with some white or other colors mixed in with the raincoat. There was a pair of cute bunnies on the hood. She had a bunny tail on her back. She was riding a huge bunny doll. She looked like she walked out of a fairy tale. Kurumi was wearing a black and red gothic princess dress. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and her golden eyes were exposed to the air. She looked both strange and charming, and no one could take their eyes off her. Kotori was floating in the air. Her body was surrounded by flames. She looked like she was stepping on a flying flame. Half of her white feather dress was made of flames. A veil wrapped around her body like a fairy's feather dress. She wore a horn ornament on her head. Her red eyes seemed to have flames burning in them. She looked very dreamy. Meijio's tall and perfect figure had long been covered by a gorgeous dress that seemed to be formed from light particles. There was a huge organ floating behind her, and a keyboard that looked like the keys of a piano floated in front of her. She looked like a celebrity who was about to sing, and her entire body shone with a moving radiance. As for Origami, her slender and soft body fully displayed her beauty due to her exposed uniform. She had an X-shaped thruster on her back and a huge cannon in her hand. Although she didn't look as dreamy as the other elven girls, her beauty didn't diminish at all. Looking at the group of girls gradually revealing themselves in the strong light and sensing the powerful spiritual energy or demonic energy around them, Xieming was stunned for a moment and stood up in surprise. "You're not humans?" This sentence was naturally directed at the elven girls other than Origami. It was clear that Dark Scorpion, who couldn't detect any trace of human scent from the elven girls after they unleashed their powers, was able to see through their true identities with the keen sense of smell of magical beasts. However, the elven girls didn't care about that at all. Whoosh! At that moment, apart from Meijio, Kotori, Kurumi, Toka, Origami, and the huge rabbit plushie, the 5 of them split up and rushed towards Dark Scorpion, who was floating in the air. Xieming snorted coldly when he saw that the group of girls had taken the initiative to attack. He raised his hand and pointed. 5 pitch-black beams of light shot out from his hand. They tore through space and shot towards the group of girls. The group of girls immediately flew into the sky together, and their bodies were abnormally agile as they danced in the air. In the next moment, the pitch-black beam of light passed through the place where the group of girls had been, but with a turn, it continued to chase after the group of girls. From those pitch-black light beams, the group of girls felt an extremely threatening power, and immediately, they felt some pressure in their hearts. Humph! Kotori stepped on flames and spun. She dodged the pitch-black beams with an acrobatic flying maneuver. It doesn't matter how powerful it is. It's useless if it can't hit. Miss Origami, Kurong-san shouted with a serious face as she retreated. You're the fastest. We'll be responsible for diverting his attack. You find an opportunity to attack. Origami didn't say anything. She just nodded indifferently. Her body tensed up, and under the effect of the thrusters on her back, she shot towards Xieming again. Watch me. On the ground below, Meijio, who was standing in front of a huge pipe organ, began to gently slide her slender fingers on the keyboard of light around her body. She played a smooth and beautiful tune. The army destroyer songstress, Gab Japel, Rondo. All of a sudden, a series of cylindrical objects that resembled those on a pipe organ extended out of space. The front end of the cylindrical objects was aimed directly at Dark Scorpion, and invisible sound waves rippled through the air as Meijio played the zither. Xieming didn't seem to have expected this type of attack. He was caught off guard and didn't react in time, allowing the sound waves of the rondo to pass through his body. Boom! As if a heavy mountain was pressing down on him, Xieming, who was suspended in the air, tilted his body and couldn't move for a moment. Meijio's rondo was supposed to be an offensive move, but when used on Dark Scorpion, it became a restraining move. From this, one could see how powerful a pseudo-demigod powerhouse was. It's not over yet. However, Meijio's real goal wasn't to attack Xieming. She crossed her hands and played on the keyboard in front of her. The smooth and beautiful tune suddenly had a hint of bravery. March of the Destroyer Songstress. The sound waves reverberated again. This time, it didn't affect Xieming. Instead, it affected the girls, causing a powerful force to surge out of their bodies. Even their spiritual power was strengthened. The March of the Army Destroyer Songstress has the effect of enhancing all aspects of the target's abilities. Originally, Meijio couldn't play two different pieces of music at the same time, but ever since she broke through to the 9th level, Meijio's usage of the Army Destroyer Song Girl had also increased by several levels. Now, she could play two pieces of music at the same time, and even 3 was no problem. Xieming's expression turned cold when he saw that the girl's speed, movements, and strength had increased significantly. He suddenly straightened his body. Bang! It was just a simple movement of straightening his body, but the sound waves of the rondo, which pressed down on Xieming like a heavy mountain, were immediately blown up in a muffled sound. Immediately afterward, Xieming waved his hand and the surrounding space twisted slightly. A terrifying force brewed within.